Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Um, I'm going to mention, I've already mentioned this. Today's Tuesday, September 24th. I started this video earlier today. I had some leftover things that I'm going to bring up that I got a dental appointment, which I already have 2 dental appointments. And I think I talk a little bit about that there, so I'll expand on that there. And my brother had been trying to reach me, which I've talked about in the Journey series, and whatever. But since that time, I've got a really couple of funny memes. But I had this kind of, big thing I want to talk about here in terms of gratitude. First of all, the whole shadow banning thing. I'm getting less and less comments of people saying they had forgotten about my channel. And now, out of the blue, YouTube recommended a video of mine when they hadn't done that for like years. I was getting 2-3 comments a day like that. And that was, after I got into it with a couple of YouTube bots and said they were shadow banning, and they said they don't do that, and now they, have tried to not do that. And people had said, I'm not sure if it was other YouTube, I'm not sure where I heard it, but somebody had said, or I heard that if you complain to YouTube, they try to appease you for a little bit, and then they go back to their old BS. And so that appears to be happening. So again, liking videos and subscribing and resubscribing and leaving comments, even if it's just an emoji. And the other things that you can do is there's a membership program and one-time donations. There's a PayPal donation in the in the description box of every video. Recommending the videos to other people, sharing them on social media, my actual video, not copying the video and reposting it on your channel. That's not helpful. It's the opposite of helpful. But anyways, there's all that stuff. But what I want to talk to you about is gratitude. I guess that's part of it, what I just said. And so I was reading that this coach for the Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell, and I'd show you a picture and all that stuff, but it's not really necessary. So Dan Campbell was on the show Hard Knocks, and he had just been hired, and he's a big guy who's really pumped up, like somebody who drinks like a lot of coffee, really amped up. And he turned that dismal franchise around, right? Before Dan Campbell, I don't know the last time, it had been years since the Detroit Lions were in the playoffs. It had been like 15-20 years, and it had been even longer since they won a playoff game. And they had been very dismal and, kind of a hopeless franchise. So he came in there and he had a lot of energy, and they made some good moves in terms of draft picks and acquiring free agents. One of those moves was trading Matthew Stafford, which I'll come back to that because that's part of this thing. And so he brought the Detroit Lions not only to the playoffs, but they won their division. They were the second best team in the NFC. And they made it all the way to the NFC Championship game, 1 game away from the Super Bowl. And Dan Campbell had everything to do with that. And part of it was he went for it on 4th down quite a bit. And when they were in the NFC Championship game, he went for it. They didn't get it. And San Francisco ended up winning the game. And, people were pointing that him going for it kind of lost the game, right? But even after reviving this dismal franchise and giving them hope, they got a young team. They have a lot of upside, and they look pretty good this year. But after he did that, his daughter goes to, public school or whatever she goes to, high school or something. And some of her classmates were really pissed off about Dan Campbell going for it, and they blamed him for not making it to the Super Bowl because they're really dopey young punks that don't know what's going on, right? Like a level of ingratitude. So they show up at his house to, I guess, yell. They were yelling at the house, and they put it on social media. And by doing that, they disclosed where he and his family lived. The cops got involved, and the kids actually kind of realized they screwed up and were kind of apologetic. Cops didn't do anything to the kids, but Dan Campbell and his family had to sell their house and move to another house because of all the reasons, right? And so these dopey kids who know nothing about the history of the Detroit Lions and the great job that Dan Campbell does, they view that he made one mistake. It's something that he does quite often, He's not going to make it every time they go for it on fourth down. But they do it. It's helped them a number of games. They've won games because of it, right? It's not like the San Diego Chargers coach who kept on going for it and they kept on failing. He eventually got fired for that because he just kept on doing it and it never worked out. It was something different. This guy breathed life into the franchise. But these, obnoxious teenagers, ingrateful teenagers, went and decided to harass him because, he didn't get them to the Super Bowl after years and years of sucking, right? But to add to it, I covered this before in my other channel. So Matthew Stafford was the number one pick of some draft years and years ago. He's like, 12, 13 years ago. And the guy came to the Detroit Lions, and the guy played hurt all the time. He never complained. He was just a good player. And the opportunity came for him to be traded to the Los Angeles Rams. Now, the Detroit Lions ended up getting Jared Goff, who was also the number one pick, but he wasn't as good as Matthew Stafford, and they got draft compensation. Now, Jared Goff is a younger player who had potential, and he's playing kind of great now, probably as good as Matthew Stafford is, and he's got many more years left, and he came with a lot of draft picks and other things from the Rams, and it kind of, helped reboot the Detroit Lions football team, right? And so Matthew Stafford, with the Lions' permission, was talking to the Los Angeles Rams, and the Detroit Lions wanted to trade him. And so it was a mutual agreement. He had been a good Lion. He had been a good player for their team. And so before that game, they played the playoffs last year. And before the game, his wife was walking across the field with like these, young little girls, right? Like little blonde girls that were like 5, 4, and 2 years old. Like one was a toddler. They were really young kids. And the Lions fans started to yell and threaten the mom and yell at the kids and abuse them as she walked to her place where she sat down and watched her husband play, even after years of him playing hurt and doing a good job for the franchise, a franchise that was dismal. And there was a mutually agreed upon trade. He didn't screw the franchise over and sign a free agent contract with somebody else. He didn't leave them. It was like like a positive move for both of the teams and both the player. And the fans decided to abuse his wife and kids because that's what people are like, right? I mean, there's just no sense of decency anymore. And the Lions fans aren't the worst. I mean, that would probably be either the Raiders fans, even though now they're in Vegas, so probably not as much as they were when they were in Oakland, or the Philadelphia Eagles fans. Of course, the New England fans are always, there's different fans that suck more some of these cities. But I mean, these people are horrible people, right? They just absolutely suck as human beings. You can't please them, right? And they're losers. Like, they do things that will sabotage any chance of, if they had any input into these organizations, they'd fire Dan Campbell and they'd be stuck with another shitty coach like they've had for years, because these people suck, right? They can't make good decisions. They don't know what it takes to win, and they can't handle any sort of disappointment. And with each generation, it's getting worse. So with that in mind, I got a few comments I want to get to here. And so let me get to this one second. So the first one is the person, let me make this bigger here. The painful truth about Kamala and Trump. And hey, Diddy, save some dildos for the rest of us. That to me was a great title. Paul, you support Harris? Unsubscribed. You are unpleasant and not the wise seer you think you are. Trump 100%, red heart, white heart, blue heart, prayer hands, cross, American flag, 100% again, and a muscle arm, somebody with their fist, somebody making a muscle. We need him, certainly not you or your warped views. Well, anybody with half a brain would know I'm not a Kamala Harris supporter, but you can't even conceive of what I am because you're too stupid. Like, you just don't have the level of consciousness to understand what I am. And I'm not some evolved seer or some, I don't see myself as that, right? For years I was a slacker and underachiever, and I know real spiritual people, saintly people, people that have evolved higher than I have, and there's much more to go after that for even them, right? So if I, in my position as whatever I am, just some chucklehead on the internet, if I, I can't even explain my position to you, because I do. Like I've said it over and over in these videos. This person had a mark there. They were, no, they weren't. So I don't know how long they watched the videos. I've never seen them comment before. But in the video itself, I mean, even in the title, The Real Truth About Kamala and Trump, I hammer both of them. I think I start off by talking about Kamala. And so I call her knee pads here's and, and talk about how unlikable she is. I was talking about her long before any of you guys were. All the way back in 2019 when she was running for president. I was slamming her and making fun of her and things 5 years ago, long before she was vice president and long before, now everybody's focused on her. And so it's silly. But I can't even explain my point of view to you because you're too remedial in your ability to process what's going on around you. Like it's amazing you can get through a day. Like you must bump into shit all the time and just make mistakes and I don't even know what it's like to be you. Like it just must really suck, right? Like to be that stupid. Like you can't even understand my point of view. But you came in hard with all these insults, right? You support Harris, unsubscribed. You are unpleasant and not a wise seer you think you are. Yeah, but I'm so much smarter and more evolved than you because you don't even understand what I am. Like you live in a binary world where if I criticize Trump, I must be supporting Kamala Harris, and nobody can dissuade you of that because you don't have the ability to understand what anybody's talking about, right? Like you're just walking around lost, bumping into shit. Like you're just, it's pathetic. And then, the ingratitude of it all, right? Because what I'm putting out there is just, it's more evolved than what you are. So this person wrote 2 comments to 2 different videos, a simple solution to the problem of humanity and the painful truth about Kamala. This person wrote comments to both of those videos, and they are back to back. The first one, she wrote, "Only Jesus can save the world. Accept him as a savior, repent from your evil, and follow the only perfect one who has walked the earth. Nothing and no one else can save you. Repent." Now, again, this is probably some crazy, Christian who's just dumb and, probably had mental issues, maybe comes from abuse and just, you couldn't even talk to this person if you saw him, and gives, Christians a bad name, right? Because if you saw this person, you'd be like, some lady probably in like one of those sort of, what do they call it, a house coat? Is that what they call it? One of those old people dresses, and she has probably greasy hair and, big glasses. She's probably missing one or both of her front teeth. And she's just sitting there, eating donut holes and sitting on the couch complaining about why Jerry Springer was canceled. Just like that, this kind of a Christian, right? But she followed it up with a second one. Repent and believe on Jesus Christ. She meant in, but she misspelled on. He wants you to return to him. Stop going your own way, thinking you are God. Turn around and follow him. He loves you. He died for you. Repent and believe. Now, I've explained this over and over again, the problems with Christianity, and not that Christian people and the religion is 100% bad. I've explained that there's problems with the organization of it, and this isn't about Jesus. This is about them taking Jesus' teachings and warping them for their own personal gain and profit and all the things, right? But it was interesting, on the same day, one of my friends on Facebook posted this, and it is, I have it here, it's from the Bible Hub, and this is from the King James version of the Bible, and there was, this is about David. Now, I've recently heard about David, I've covered this, that David wanted to marry somebody's king's daughter, and the king didn't want him to marry her, so he said, you have to go and you have to take 100 foreskins. That would mean kill these people, Philistines or one of these other groups of people, whatever it was, right? and to the enemy of this king. You have to go and kill 100 of them and then cut their foreskins off their dead bodies. And then, I'll let you bury my wife. And David was a go-getter. So he said, fuck that, bro. I'm not going to take 100. I'll take 200. And so he took 200 foreskins of these people that he killed. And he, won this king's wife, and then he became king. But David, who appears to be a real piece of shit, right? And, somebody who's a hero of the Bible and, the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament. And, people look up to him. He decides to go and bang Uriah, the Hittite, and his wife. He decides to bang his wife. I forget what his wife is. And so he takes this guy's wife and he kills the guy. And so God is pissed at him for doing this. And so he says, that has killed Uriah the Hittite with his sword, and has taken his wife to be thy wife, and has slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from thine house, because thou hast despised me, and hast taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be thy wife. You already said that. Thus saith the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house, and I will take thy wives before thine eyes, and give them unto thy neighbor, and he shall lie with them, and thy wives in the sight of the sun. For thou didst secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun. And so, God's kind of a prick here. I mean, David went and he banged this wife in secret and impregnated her, and then, all the stuff that happened, had to kill her husband. And so God says, you know what? Because you're a piece of shit, I'm going to take your wives and give them to these neighbors so they can be arred by your neighbors, because your wives should suffer for you being such a piece of shit, and I'll show you. Instead of, making David maybe get arred by somebody or killed by somebody because he killed this other guy, he decides to punish David's wives, and therefore David, because David had to live with the shame of his wives being arred by the neighbors. And so God sucks in the Old Testament, and this book sucks. David sucks. It's very remedial. It's not a good spiritual book. That's not how God really is, and he's not a punishing God, and it's just so primitive and just goofy. It's unevolved. These teachings are not really about God. God is really a narcissistic demon or something that they're worshiping, some demon that has power or some shit, I don't know, right? And there's been lots of issues with the thing I do. Sajmark system, the Heartfulness cult, this guy Dodgy who's taken over. Those of you who have listened to my Journey series, some of my other videos know about it. The Sajmark meditation that I do was just this great, pure, simple organization. And it was the current president and master of the system is just a piece of shit, right? And I've talked about this a lot. And he's done scams, a Brighter Mind scam, and he's gone against these teachings, and he's done a lot of bad shit. But none of the stuff he's done is even close to what God is proposing for David and what David is doing to his neighbors. I mean, it's just so low budget, right? I mean, the shit that's been done in the Bible is nowhere near on the level of the teachings and even the lower level teachings of the thing that I do. It's just more sophisticated, and it's more subtle, and it's more evolved than these religions, right? And I'm not saying this is about Jesus. I'm saying this is about the teachings they present to dummies. It's for dummies, right? Like, it's, if that's all you can do because you're a dummy, then great, do it. I'm not, there's plenty of channels and there's plenty of people out there that put shit out there for dummies. And this isn't one of them. This is for people who aspire to be, higher than a dummy, right? That higher than some low-life binary fuck that's, doesn't have the ability for abstract thought. There's plenty of shit for dumbasses. I mean, pretty much, 95% of the internet's for dumbasses, and most of the TV shows and movies are for low consciousness people that, Homer Simpsons. There's a lot of stuff that's designed for Homer Simpsons. There's more Homer Simpsons then there are potential saints and potential higher developed souls. And so, you know, you guys have plenty of places to go, but still you wander in here and you post your dumbass shit not knowing that this isn't for dumbasses, right? Like, this just isn't for dumbasses. There's no dummies allowed, right? Stop being a dummy. You know, I'll end here and then I'll put the, hopefully I'll remember, I'll put the various, you know, Fred Sanford dummy compilation. And, you know, but, you know, there should be a sign on my channel that says not for dummies. And if you have to think about that and what it means, you are one, right?
I've done some dumb things, and I'll do dumb things again. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been dumb.
Dummy, 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 dummy. Get lost, dummy. You big cold-blooded dummy. You big dummy.
Okay, so I forgot a couple of things. Today's Wednesday, September 25th. There are a few more things I want to add to what I was saying earlier. Kind of, you know, I feel like it's kind of important. And the first part is, like, when you're in elementary school, the kids kind of know, if you ask the kids pretty accurately, and kids have a, you know, their consciousness is developing, right? They don't have, you know, they have kind of an innocence that you lose. They have some advantages. You know, they don't have, they're not jaded and they're not cynical. At least they shouldn't be. I mean, it happens when it happens, right? If you've been in, you know, horrible situations, some kids, but, you know, for the most part, kids are more innocent and more, you know, whatever they are. But they can tell you who the kids in the class, who's the smart kids, who the kids good at sports, who are the troublemakers, right? Like, kids are pretty honest about it, and kind of more honest about where they fit into it, right? Because they don't have to, I mean, unless, again, they're in a horrible situation, they don't have to lie to themselves and build themselves up, and, you know, I mean, as long as they have some sort of, you know, they're receiving some sort of appropriate parenting and love and whatever it is. But you have on the internet is, and you can see it, that with everybody being able to express their opinions and say whatever they think about any subject, they think that somehow what they have to say is valuable. I mean, you can see it from people's comments. And also, like, they can't assess when people are beyond them, like, are more evolved than them, right? And that's another problem with, like, America being what it is. I mean, I think some of it comes from people saying, "Oh, you can be whatever you want, you know, and you know, you can anything, you can accomplish anything." And first, that's not true for everybody. But secondly, there are people who don't know how dumb they are, right? Like, they think that they're smart, and, you know, not smart and dumb is not like, it's not about, like, your IQ or your ability to get good grades. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a level of consciousness. It's a level of awareness, right? It's a level of maturity. It's a level of making good decisions. It's a level of, you know, refinement in your ability to, you know, process what's going on around you, right? It's the ability to make good decisions and wise decisions and things like that. And just like in school, like in the average classroom, the majority of attention goes to kids who, I mean, first of all, have behavioral issues. You know, and like, if you have a big family, you have kids, you know what I'm talking about when you have, like, one person, a kid who's just, you always have to have a plan for that person, right? And if you have a couple of people like that, you know, for me it was, you know, the couple of the kids and my ex, you know, like, you never knew when they were just gonna, like, freak out. Like, you have mentally ill people, or you have people with, you know, issues, you never know when they're just going to get triggered by something and wreck it for everybody. Like, if you go on a family outing and you're someone who's just so high maintenance, and so the high maintenance people, and that could be, you know, kids who just aren't able to process what's going around them, and so they need extra attention, right? Because they can't, you know, do the work, right? Like, I was dyslexic and introverted, but I was never high maintenance. Like, I, you know, whatever was going on, whatever struggles I had, it wasn't like it took up a lot of the time of the teacher. You know, I was always kind of, you know, fading into the background because that's where I felt comfortable, right? But, you know, there are people who are just high maintenance, and they're always, you know, whatever it is, it's always drama, it's always whatever. And those are the people that get all the attention. Now, in our school system, the stuff is, you know, to how to deal with the kids that are struggling, just because they could be good kids, they don't have the like mental ability to do the work. They're just not good at school or whatever. They could have good personalities, but the troublemakers, you know, they get the most attention. And people who are gifted and talented, they don't get shit, right? There's nothing left for them. They just have to sit there and, you know, as you go through the, you know, whatever it is. There are people who are just, their consciousness is just different. And in that group, there are people who are just spiritually advanced. There are people who have potential to be saints. They just have a, you know, from past experiences, whatever it is. They come in from a different, you know, higher level of, you know, their soul is on a higher, you know, plane of existence, and so that, you know, manifests on the physical world. And in India, it's kind of recognized, right? Like, that's one of the good things about that country. There's a lot of bad things, but they recognize higher developed souls. Unfortunately, there are people who can pose as that as well, right? People who are maybe a little bit smarter but not really spiritually advanced, and they can fake it and act it. And, you know, there's so many people who are on a lower level of consciousness because they suffer from malnutrition and all the rest of it. But my point is, there aren't many places out there on the internet or anywhere else where people who have a more, you know, developed consciousness can come to, right? Most of the stuff is just dumb. It's for dumb people. And dumb people don't recognize they're dumb. In fact, they often wear it as a badge of fucking honor. They're like, you know, they display their stupidity or their like evilness, and they think it's like, you know, they think it's like some kind of advantage or ability. Like, you know, American kids have a distaste for education, partially because our school system sucks, partly because we, you know, we're more entitled. But they, you know, people who don't read and don't, you know, think and don't, you know, don't develop their mental capabilities, and they're proud of it. They brag about it. They, you know, they talk about how they're stupid they are, and, you know, in a way where they're, I mean, they don't call themselves stupid, they just show their ignorance. Like, people think ignorance is something to be proud of. Lower levels of consciousness. And so, you know, that's the problem. Like why would you be here if it isn't for what I'm talking about? Like, why would a Christian come? Like, you know, again, not in terms of the spiritual stuff, if they're sold on Christianity and they think that everyone else is going to hell. I mean, they're very, you know, because people who are more sophisticated and are Christians, they can totally come here and watch my videos. But people who are, you know, saying that everyone else is going to hell and just buying into the whole indoctrination of their religion, there's plenty of places for you to go. There's mega churches, and there's, you know, all these things exist on the internet. There's plenty of people who agree with you. There's plenty of cubies. There's plenty of dumbass Trump supporters and channels like that, right? Like, there's stuff for you all over the place, right? There's for other people who are, you know, I mean, who have a higher level of consciousness and can see through the left-right paradigm and can see what Trump actually is. You know, they're not deluding themselves. It's not about wishful thinking. There's very few places, and there's less people like that, right? And, you know, those people need places too. You know, they need places to go. And you're getting something from this channel, right? There's something that I have of value. Like, it's like, oh, you're great on everything with this one thing. I don't comment and tell you how great you are at everything else. But this one thing you say that I know you're wrong about, because, you know, I'm completely butthurt about what you just said, and I gotta, you know, write a whiny comment about it. Like, it's just the nature of humanity, right? Like, I'm not, you know, bummed out about it, but it's just what humanity is. And so there's another comment I forgot about, which was odd. You know, I didn't take a screenshot of it, but I could say it basically what the person said, because it wasn't like sentence, and it was so like evil. Like, I'm surprised I forgot about it. But the person said, "Okay, I get it. Because you failed as a parent, we should have gun control." And that was in reference to, like, it took me a while to understand what the comment was about, and because I wasn't pushing for gun control, I was talking about people not being mature enough to have guns. And I talked about my daughter's suicide and how somebody gave her a gun when she just should be a person that would never have one because of her impulsivity, right? And so that person was, I mean, saying a horrible thing, right? And it doesn't, you know, like I've said before, when I decided to talk about my daughter's suicide, I knew people would try to use it against me. Like, it's just how evil people are, right? I mean, this person's a horrible person. Like, just, you know, a worthless, horrible person. And they're proving my point, you know, that people suck. And, I mean, you can't give people the ability to express themselves on the internet without them abusing it, right? Whatever it is, whether it be cars, whether it be guns, whether it be your words, like, people will weaponize anything and do bad shit with it and be irresponsible with it. Like, people aren't ready for even cell phones. Like, they can't even handle having a cell phone. People abuse everything. You know, TVs, whatever it is. They watch too much, you know, whatever. It really affects them. Like, people aren't mature enough to handle our technology and integrate it into their lives and still live productive lives, whether it be, you know, alcohol addiction or sex addiction, you know, porn. You know, it negatively affects them in some way. Drugs, you know, whatever. I mean, people aren't mature for any of these things. You know, people say, all right, we should have freedom of choice, abortion, you know, any number of things. People are not capable of making good decisions, mature decisions, and abuse everything and misuse everything, and, you know, put other people at risk, and, you know, get drunk and drive, and, you know, all the bad decisions people make, right? I mean, why would you allow 16-year-olds to drive? You know, give them this big weapon, you know, now, especially even with cell phones and reading their cell phones and, you know, doing these things, right? When you're at a time where you're always every 16-year-old makes some bad decisions. And if the bad decision happens to be related to driving a car, it could be, you know, deadly to people, right? And it's just, you know, but even when they're 21 or 31 or they get too old, the people who are, you know, they're losing their capabilities and they're driving through. I mean, there's these old people that drive through places all the time. Like, you know, like there's people who are eating outside on sidewalks, and some old person just plowed through them, you know, killing multiple people because that person wasn't, you know, was at dementia, whatever it might be, right? And so people aren't capable of having weapons and any number of things where they can make bad decisions. That was my point, right? Like, it's, you know, you have to have them when other people have them. I mean, that's the issue. But guns make it too easy. They're killing machines to kill. And you have, you know, bad people, evil people, crazy people, stupid people with, you know, something that's just so easy to kill somebody else, right? Or hurt themselves, or, you know, just mishandle the firearm and, you know, shoot themselves. I mean, you know, the family member by accident. I mean, these things happen all the time, right? And, you know, making it easier for people to kill and do damage, you know, when people are self-destructive and all these things. People are mentally ill and just low functioning. And we shouldn't have any of the stuff we have, because we've proven over and over again that we will abuse whatever technology we have, right? Whatever machines we have that rip up natural habitat, right? You know, bulldozers. I drove a bulldozer. It's wonderful. But I know how much damage bulldozers do to environments and habitat and, you know, just any number of things, these power equipment. I love all those things. Like, if I had, you know, lots of money, I would own all of them. Like, I'd own a backhoe and a bulldozer, these things, skid steer. Like, they're just wonderful devices. And they, you know, they save you so much time. But then again, you know, they do so much damage to the natural environment, you know. So you could list all the things that are out there that people aren't mature enough and haven't evolved enough to own responsibly. And there's levels of consciousness and stupidity. But this person took something, you know, the pain of my daughter's suicide, and decided to say, you know, and reference it as being a bad parent, and misstate what I was saying, because I wasn't pushing for gun control, you know, the way that they're trying to do it, because what they're doing is they want to get it out of the hands of the citizens, but leave it in the hands of the police and the military. That's always a recipe for disaster, right? So that was my point. And so this person, you know, misstate my statement on gun control, and you know, tried to weaponize my daughter's suicide as a way to, you know, hurt my, you know, whatever, feelings, and attack my parenting, right? And this is what I'm talking about. This person demonstrating like they have the ability to comment, and that's how they use their ability. Because I say mean things about people, but I would never say something like that to somebody, right? Like, that's just, and saying it to me, like, not about me, to other people. but trying to say it to me. And again, like, there's nothing, that anybody can say that's going to make that's equal to the pain of my daughter's, not just their suicide, but the way she turned out, right? That's just painful. Like, no matter what people say, what they want to say about me, about, trying to blame it on me and trying to make me feel bad or whatever, that's not nearly as bad as her commit suicide. Like, there's just, words are just words, but people weaponize words. And so they're not even, like, this person shouldn't be able to communicate, right? Like, in terms of, like, what they're misusing. And it's not because of the damage it causes to me or somebody else or whatever. It's the damage they do to themselves. It's the, the evil that they it's the bad stuff that they deserve, like what people consider karma, right? When people think about karma, like, people say stuff like that, you immediately hope that that person suffers both from guns and, that person, what kind of parent will that person be, right? When they, they're that evil. Like, that's the level of their, they didn't understand my position on gun control and guns in general. I was just, giving a more sophisticated look about, and proving my point that people just suck and aren't responsible enough to, use killing machines, right? When people say people kill people, not guns don't kill people. Yeah, but people suck, and you're giving people who suck and are stupid and can't even, they're low consciousness, and you're giving them weapons of death, and they have them in their house or whatever, and they, that's the reality. Untrained people. And then you have people who are, with the legal right to kill, who are military and police, and, you're arming them. People who are abusing power. You get it across the board. Like, people just suck, right? That's my point. And then the person says, oh, I'll use, I don't like this person's position, or maybe they don't like me, and I'll use his daughter's suicide as a way to get him, right? Like, this is some sort of competition, like, like, and but you're displaying what a horrible piece of shit you are, right? As a human being. Like, you don't deserve anything. Like, you deserve bad things for the way that you think and the way that you conduct yourself, and, like, you're trying to weaponize a situation, showing everything that I say, right? Like, everything that I'm saying here. And so my overall point is, there's plenty of evil, dumb shit on the internet. Low consciousness, people who are either really stupid and, oblivious, or people who have been wrecked emotionally and just are hateful, and, the amount of hate that exists in America and the world, and, all these things, right? And so in that, there's these little havens of something a little bit better, and people don't appreciate those things. And most people, like, they don't understand them, and they can't rise up to it, right? And so, like, there's, like I said, there's plenty of places for you to go for your, your dumb shit or your evil shit, and, people like you, and, go to those places. Like, don't come to, recognize that there's something better or something more evolved, and, like, you should be glad that there is, right? That there's actually hope for you and, the people around you, and the people like you, right? Like, there's a path forward and a way upwards from where you are, and, like, that should make us all happy. Like, makes me happy that there are people more evolved, and there's little levels of consciousness that I could, evolve into, that this isn't just the dumb shit and the evil shit, that there's actually, levels of sainthood and spiritual development and consciousness that we could all aspire to rise up to. We should be happy about that and celebrate it, not try to tear people like that down, which is what people do, because, people are stuck in their low level consciousness and are jealous of the fact that other people are, beyond them, right? Like, it's just silly. You should be psyched that there are people beyond you. Like, you should, be happy that there's people like that. Gives you hope. Like, maybe I could someday get my shit together and aspire to be like that, right? But that's why, people in the West suck, because they killed their saints. All of Jesus and his disciples were murdered, like, in horrific ways, tortured, not just murdered, tortured. Like, what, why would Jesus ever be murdered? Like, what did Jesus do that you would murder him for, right? Confront the Pharisees and that were monetizing, that, were supposed to be spiritual places, temples, were turning them into banks, or confront the abuse just verbally. He wasn't even, having riots or organizing people. questioning the authority of the Roman government, like he deserved to be, tacked up the way that he was. I mean, people get, tortured and hung. If you go and find out, you look at all the disciples and you find out how they died. They died like in unimaginable deaths at the hands of people who are abusing their power. And why wouldn't people be like, oh my God, there's somebody who's spiritually more developed than I am? That's a good thing. Oh, I can, maybe some life I'll be better than I am now. I won't be a worthless piece of shit that says mean shit and does bad shit to people. Maybe in some life I can evolve. Just having examples of people like that you can maybe like someday, or other people at least, can aspire to. But humanity, and especially now, and people in the West particularly, oh, that person's a saint, oh, let's kill him. Like that's what happens. I mean, literally, like that's, that's happened over and over again. Oh, that person is rising up to a higher level than the rest of us, let's pull that person down, beat the shit out of him, right? And so, like, that's the stupidity. That's like where humanity, like, there's no hope. Like, you should have at least something to hope for. Like, people that you can look up to, and even if you don't want to, and you resent your fucking inability to be a better person, your own like poor development, your own shitty lives or whatever, like just somebody to aspire to. I was watching this 30 for 30 about Randy Moss, and he came from a place called Rand, West Virginia, and it was an unincorporated town, which meant it had no government. It had just 2,000 people living there. It had like one grocery store. It's out in the country, but just impoverished people. And they had this thing called Rand University, where they had all these athletes like Randy Moss and the basketball player Jason Williams, the white guy. There's a couple of Jason Williamses, but there was the white guy who was called White Chocolate or something like that, his nickname. But he was a guy who had a lot of ball handling skills, and they were on the same high school basketball team. One of them went to the NBA, and Randy Moss was one of the best receivers anywhere. But there's all these other great athletes that came from that town, and they didn't go to college. They screwed it up somehow. Randy Moss was almost one of them. He ended up going to jail. There was a lot of racial tension in his high school, and he beat up some white kid, and they, he was served like 30 days in jail, and then he got caught smoking pot, and he was like the #1 receiver. Like, he was just such a gifted athlete, and they show him in high school, and he's just running through people. He was 6'4", and he was probably the fastest guy in the NFL during his time, right? But there was all these people that hung out near the 7-Eleven, and they called it Rand University, because they were people who were like potential All-Americans. They won high school champions. They just produced all these athletes. But West Virginia is a very degraded state. Like, I drove through there a few times, very depressed, and they just have this low-level consciousness, right? And people in the black community were mad at him, and people in the white community were mad at him, right, for like smoking pot. Like, it was like limited stuff. The kid, he wrote on his white kid wrote on his desk, all N-words must die. And so Randy Moss's friend said, I want to beat this kid up. And Randy Moss helped a little bit, but they blamed the whole thing on him. And the kid got a ruptured spleen and this stuff, right? And so, it was a school fight over, racial tensions and things. And like the whole community was against him. And plus, he didn't want to go to if he had wanted to go to West Virginia, he didn't go there as a college because he wanted to get the fuck out of this area. Like, he just wanted to leave because it was, it's a place where, anybody should want to leave, right? And, I saw this also with Kevin Durant and LeBron James were talking about this. Like, they did some kind of like a interview in a car. They were just having a conversation, and this was before LeBron James started to do this barbershop thing that he has. And they were talking about how when you start becoming, you live in like the ghetto, you live in the inner city, and you start becoming somebody great at sports, everybody there most people want to pull you down. Most of the people there don't want to see you evolve out of your situation and become a rich famous person, they just they start trashing you, and they start talking about what a piece of shit you are, or whatever it is. Chris Rock did a similar thing where he said, in the black community, they celebrate somebody getting out of prison, but they won't celebrate somebody getting a master's degree or graduating college or something. Like there's no, like he was talking about how, celebrating something, that's like, you're coming back to us, but somebody who's evolving out of a, an impoverished situation, right? And that's across the board. That's, throughout the, people who are on a lower level of consciousness. And shouldn't you be happy that there's now hope? I mean, that's what, the lottery's about. When people, but even more so, people move to America because they're poor-ass, dumb-ass people who become rich people. People who lived in poverty, some of them coming over for another country where they lived in hell. They lived in some, abusive, war-torn or whatever, type of country. And they come to America, and as young kids or whatever, as a family, and that kid becomes a millionaire, even in some cases a billionaire, right? It's just not heard of. Like most people who grow up in situations like that, they have no chance, right, in their countries. They're caught up in a, like a caste system in India and like that kind of prejudice, and you have no chance. There's no hope for you to rise out of your humble beginnings. But when somebody does do that, and when somebody goes to a higher level, especially on a spiritual level, when people rise up to a higher level spiritually, it should be celebrated because it gives you hope that you could do the same thing, right? That you could aspire to do that. It gives you something to look up towards instead of looking down at people. Like, people are always looking for people who are worse off than them so that they can, even in a sense where they pity them or where they, say, look at what a piece of shit that person is. And that's the problem with humanity. People are always looking down instead of looking up. And when you see somebody that's on a higher level than you, it should make you happy. Like it should make you, I wish everybody was on a higher level than me, right? Like if I was the worst person in the world would be a lot better. Like, like it should be something where you aspire to look up that there's people and there's something that you could become that's better than the piece of shit that you are right now. When I talk about Trump being a piece of shit, it's because he gravitates to, and not that, Kamala isn't, that's a given, right? But there's so many people in the truth community that think Trump is great. He's a horrible human being, and he's not aspiring to be better. Like if you're not working on yourself and looking to improve yourself and, better yourself from your mistakes and, ultimately like answering to God and having a relationship with God, internalizing the divinity within you where, in real time, there's like some inner voice saying, yeah, that's what a piece of shit would do, and you don't want to do that, right? Like when you want to do something that's low level and low consciousness. But, even if you couldn't do it, just hoping that seeing that other people can means that humanity has a chance, right? But if you want to pull down the saints and beat the shit out of them and kill them and, pull everybody down to your level because you're jealous and pathetic and, you're just, worthless piece of shit that you can't have that, that you can't have it in your face that you're failing and that there's actually people on a higher level than you, then, there's no sense of even thinking about saving humanity, right? Because that's what humanity is, right? It's just, people who are basking in their low-level consciousness, who are like wear it as, like I said, a badge of honor, instead of, realizing that they can go up to another level. Like even if they don't want to, you should at least be happy that there is other levels that people can gravitate to you. Maybe after, you fuck up your life enough or you fuck up enough lives that you could rise up to a higher level. Like there's levels available to you if someday you choose to, to embrace that, right? Like maybe you don't want to do it now, but at least, all right, well, if I ever get my shit together, there's an opportunity for me. Like there's a pathway forward. And so that's the scourge of humanity, right? That celebrating their, knowing that there's levels that they could go to and celebrating choosing the lowest levels. Celebrating choosing their stupidity and their evil nature and the selfishness and the self-destructive part of it. Like celebrating their failure as people. Like, yeah, we should all, let's all just go down together. Let's fight for our right to party, right? Like stupid ass shit like that. There's a ton of that everywhere. And so, like, be happy that there's something that's above that, right? Like, even if it's on the lowest level of the spiritual world, it's still higher than the whole, the rest of the crap that people fucking devolve into. So anyways, let's move on to some of the covering some of the low-level shit that's going on there. Okay. Today's Tuesday, September 24th. I'm finishing up a Journey series video. My brother was trying to contact me, which is a whole nightmare. Thing that's going on. I got stuff going on. I got dental appointments to get two. I got two mercury-filled metal fillings that are wearing out and are leaching out into my mouth and my body. Good times. So I don't recommend anything, but I was talking about how, I've had issues with my teeth the last so many years, and I've, had some dentist when I was a kid just put metal fillings in all of my family's mouth, just everywhere he could. Like, he just put it where I didn't have cavities, and he just put metal in my mouth that, is now leaking out mercury, which sucks, right? So, and these metal fillings are deteriorating. I switched to the high-level Sonicare toothbrush. I thought that I was getting enough with the normal one. My wife and I saw that they were on sale at Costco. And it said 20% plaque, better on plaque. I'm like, how much better could it be, right? I mean, 20%, 20 times what a regular toothbrush does. But the other ones were like 10 times. And like, how much, sonic energy do you need, or whatever sonic is, right? But we got it, and it was amazing. And it really turned the tide. I switched to this nano hypoxytrate toothpaste, which is supposed to be basically made up of these particles that are 98 or 99% exactly like what's made up of your teeth, and your teeth can absorb this material, and it's supposed to help enamel again. Like, it was just something we were trying, and I had tried all kinds of different things, and my teeth actually got a lot better. All of it got better. I talked about this in an appointment. But the sonic aspect, the 20 times more force in the sonic toothbrush, started to erode some of the metal fillings. I think that, the vibrations have caused two of my fillings to. You can see the difference. I saw a picture of 4 months ago where it was already starting to dissipate, and that metal's going into my body. So I have to get all the metal out of my mouth, and you don't want to get it done all at once, because there's a woman read an article where she got 9 metal fillings removed, and she died of toxicity poisoning, because the people who removed them didn't know what they were doing. She was swallowing a bunch of it, right? And so that's what's going on. So I have these 2 minor cavities I got before I switched the toothbrush, and I was hoping that the toothpaste would work, and I think the cavities actually got better, but they're so small. They're on my gum line, so I got to do all that stuff at the dentist. I have an appointment today. Today's Wednesday, the 25th, and then one tomorrow when I upload this video. And so, so that's going on, and I'll talk more about that after I'm done. So anyways, I have these leftover little tabs open with things that I never made it into a video because I ran out of time. But they're all kind of important, so I want to cover those things first here. And then we'll move on to stuff, that's happening in real time now, including a great interview with Fetterman, which is kind of old itself. I mean, all these things are things that were worth covering. I just never got a chance to cover. Let's start off with this one.
You have the top level security clearance, right? You
Yes,
have
yes,
it's
I
as
do.
high as it can get.
Yes.
So when you become vice president officially, when you're sworn in,
Yeah.
have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're like, you know what, I'm just curious from a personal level about something like whether it be UFOs or JFK or Jimmy Hoffa or any of these things that we all want
Jimmy Kimmel asking a real question. This is years ago, though.
to know what happened? Have you taken those steps to look into those things?
I am interested in a number of those subjects.
Yeah. And then did you tell somebody, like, hey, I'd like to see whatever files, and then somebody delivers them to you, and you sit there and go, whoa.
I'm not giving you any more than I gave
Nothing?
you.
You have the top.
Nobody would tell Kamala anything. Why in the world would you tell Kamala anything? just because you have a security clearance, like a Q level security clearance or whatever the top level is, doesn't mean that they're going to tell you. It means they can tell you, right? It doesn't mean like you sit down your first day and they're like, oh, here's all the dirty secrets. Like they can't wait to divulge these things to someone who might not even be there for a full term. You know, maybe only going to be there for 4 years or 8 years, and then they become a private citizen and they know all this shit, right? We've seen how presidents handle classified documents, Biden and Trump, and you know, stuff with Hillary Clinton. I mean, we know about this, right? Like they don't want you to know. These are lifelong people that are going to work in these jobs. They're career people, and these movements, these missions and things, their plans have gone on for 50, 60 years, and you come in as a newly elected president. They don't want you to know shit, right? They certainly don't want Kamala to know anything. I mean, Kamala's totally is loud, and she'll talk about stuff, and she's knee pads. A lot of these people are alcoholics. They get drunk and whatever. They're stupid, like Fetterman. You think they want Fetterman to know shit, right? So wait till we show Fetterman at the end of the video. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like his brain doesn't function. And so they only tell you when you have to. If you go snooping around trying to, get information, like you call these guys in and say, yeah, give me everything you got on the Kennedy assassination. Well, why do you want to know that? Why would you want to know that? They're going to, try to block that as much as possible. Why do you want to know if there's aliens, right? Like, why do you want to know if you're not going to do anything, if you're not going to divulge it? Oh, it just will satisfy my curiosity. So it's silly. No one wants these dopes to know shit, right?
To end the Affordable Care Act.
Ooh.
And as Stacey mentioned, you heard what he said in the debate. He has no plan to replace it. He said concepts of a plan. Oh, you all watched the debate. Trump.
She's so important. So this is from like 2 weeks ago. I mean, I haven't gotten to this, and I wanted to get to it because I've been talking about it and I mentioned a few videos.
Today, I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime. You know what that means?
It means it's going to be a paperwork nightmare for accountants everywhere.
Think of that.
Like, to separate out people's overtime, right? Like that means that they now have to have specific, in terms of your tax documents that come from your employer. And someone like me, and I work overtime quite a bit. I'm not going to get shit for that. But like he's just throwing stuff up against the wall. I don't think he'll ever get any of these things passed. He wants to be the non-tax guy. The problem is if they want to pay off any sort of, if they want to stay like in some believable level of, the deficit's gotten so big and the overall debt has gotten so big, they have to bring in more income. If he isn't going to tax corporations, and if he doesn't want to raise people's taxes, and if you raise like the non-rich people taxes, if you raise the taxes on the 90%, it doesn't do shit. Rich people pay most of the taxes because of the percentage of money, right? And so they're making way more money than everybody else. Like that's why it's called like the 90%. They're making less money than the 10%. And so the 10% are going to pay more taxes overall in terms of the amount of money because it's based in percentages. But like he just throws stuff up against the wall. Like it's silly. Like he wants to get rid of tax on tips, which, that makes sense because, as long as there's cash or people are tipping you in cash, people aren't going to declare that money, right? And so at least not all of it. And so, tip, there's everybody's getting tips now, that is whatever it is. But he's just looking for any kind of way to, appease the voters. He's not going to do any of this shit, right?
Woo! Think of that.
It's right here. No tax on tips.
Think of that. That gives people more of an incentive to work.
Well, overtime is something that they don't like, hey, I want to work overtime. Great. If I have some, I'll give it to you because employers don't want to pay you overtime, right?
It gives the companies a lot, it's a lot easier to get the people. And, you know, I went to some economists, great ones, and I said, what do you think? They said, it would be unbelievable. You'll get a whole new workforce by doing that. No taxes on overtime.
How are you going to get a whole new workforce? What does that mean?
The people who work overtime are among the hardest working citizens in our country.
They're the best. You guys who just want to work 40 hours a week, you guys suck. But these guys want to work 60 to 80 hours a week. They're the true Americans, the ones who have no lives, don't see their kids. And
for too long, no one in Washington has been looking out for them. Those are the people. They really
these hard workers that are willing to give up their personal lives for their slave jobs.
They're police officers, nurses, factory workers, construction workers, truck drivers, and machine operators. It's time for the working man and woman to finally catch a break, and that's what we're doing. Because
we're giving you guys a break.
This is a good one.
It's a good one.
And I think it's going to be great for the country. So that's why we will be saying that if you're an overtime worker when you're past 40 hours a week, think of that. Your overtime hours will be tax-free. Okay? Good?
Okay, Trump. Way to go. Like, he just, you know. And he's not going to be able to do it. He's just another one of his false promises. Okay, so coming up, Trump goes to a Pennsylvania grocery store and starts buying people groceries. And it's way worse than it sounds. Like, he doesn't know his way around a grocery store. It's so goofy. I'm editing. That's coming up. It's hilarious.
Decades in law enforcement, I know the importance of safety and security, especially at our border.
That was well done. All right, so this was another one.
I mean, I love you guys. You are so smart. You are not patient. You are just ready to lead. And I'm counting on you guys. I really am. What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid. That is why we put them in dormitories. And they have a resident assistant. They make really bad decisions.
Kaboom.
There is this wonderful word that has a great meaning, and it's called hypothesis, which means...
Okay, so she often, like, she does the thing I showed you last time with Oprah Winfrey, where she tries to be so profound. And when we're talking about freedom, and all of us love America, and it's the freedom that we fight for, that's what makes, you know, this whole stuff. She says these benign bumper sticker things, and she says it like it's, like she thought of something brilliant. But the other thing is, when she talks to people like they're in kindergarten. Now, she grew up in with parents who both had PhDs, highly educated people. And her mom was a scientist, right, which scientists use hypothesis quite often. But she decided to drop this wonderful, let's go back to this beginning.
There is this wonderful word that has a great meaning, and it's called hypothesis, which means that you have an idea, and then it is well accepted, it will be tested, and then you will learn whether it was correct or not, but there will be no pride associated with the hypothesis, because after all, it was a hypothesis.
Right.
And
wow. She's always been annoying.
then you will reconvene and then create a new hypothesis.
Right.
Boom. Way to go, Kamala.
Russia's actions are a problem. They don't pose the #1 national security threat to the United States. I continue to be much more concerned when it comes to our security with the prospect of a nuclear weapon going off in Manhattan.
Boom. There already had been one. There was one that happened in 2001, brah. This was an old clip. I remember seeing this before. Somebody just sent it to me again. Very telling because, you know, it probably already happened. Okay, so let's get to some of the memes. I just completed the second voiceover, but I already did a bunch of stuff yesterday. Wonderful meme here. Is that really you, Corn Pop? Just spectacularly funny. I mean, I just saw the photo. I knew it would be great, right? Like, that's just, there's so many funny things you could say to that, right? Like, just, you know, because he has dementia. And then I saw this on Facebook. This is a great meme about the difference between the rich and the poor. You know, people want to blame the rich for everything, but if poor people or the rest of the people were good and they couldn't be compromised, then rich people couldn't run their games the way they do, right? The people who, these scumbags that run these, you know, Ponzi schemes. So Trump goes into a grocery store here.
Very nice crew. Put that up. They took something. If you have anything left over, just take it as tips, okay?
Okay, so Trump is going into the grocery store and paying for somebody's groceries because there are cameras there, right? This woman's got it on her cell phone. This is probably some staff. Maybe she might be even part of his staff. But he's going to a poor Pennsylvania town and paying for somebody's groceries and then paying in cash and saying, take a tip to the woman behind the cash register, which is, you know, if you know anything about grocery stores, she's not supposed to do that, right? They don't tip them there. I mean, I guess they tip everybody everywhere. But, you know, that she's going to take money, that he's going to give her the extra money to change and put it in her pocket. If there's anything left over, and he has no idea, like, because he's a financial man, like, he can't figure out how much this person's groceries are going to cost. And he's just throwing money, basically dropping a wad of cash there so everyone can see that he's going to pay for your groceries, right? You know, in India, the really stupid low-level people, like really underdeveloped people, politicians will go out and just give them all a bag of rice or whatever it is, like just little bits of things. And those people will be loyal to that politician and vote for that politician forever. Even if that politician passes, I mean, they have no idea what that politician's going to do. You know, someone who's like governor or mayor of a city or something. And they just buy votes, right? I mean, they'll just hand out small amounts of money to people to go vote for them. And those people will be like, oh my God, you gave me like, to 10 rupees, or, you know, it's 66 rupees to $1. And they'll get like 10 rupees and they'll think it's some wonderful thing. They're so poor, and, you know, it's just like the lowest level of things. You know, how is him buying groceries for people make him a good president, right? Especially since he's doing, you know, he's known to be cheap. You know, the art of the deal was his ability to screw other people over. Like, that means the person who was on the other side of the deal, like, he expresses this all the time, right? That he looks at things as very competitive, and that he was able to negotiate really good deals. And he was able to do this on a governmental level. So he was out there negotiating deals for America, and the other people were getting screwed. Yeah, I'll build a wall and I'll get Mexico to pay for it, right? Like, how are you going to do that? Especially since you just said that out loud. Like, Mexico's like, hey, we're not going to fucking pay for it. Like, if you were going to do that, you wouldn't tell everybody. Like, Mexico's going to be, hey, this guy's going to try and make us pay for the wall. You know, and it's this thing, right? But but he says these things, but he was in a deal with other people, like vendors and small, you know, business owners, and he would screw them over. Like, he always wanted to get the better end of the deal. He's not some generous guy. He was known as being really cheap. Chris Christie said he was the cheapest guy because he didn't have any real money. He was always just, it was a lot of just, you know, bling and flash and, you know, smoke and mirrors. And so here he is, like, pretending like this person's got all this shitty food, Reese's peanut butter cups.
You guys take it, give it to the rest of the store. Okay, don't worry about the product. Just take it as a tip, okay?
She's trying to feed a family of 3 or 4. 3 little boys.
And how's it going? Here, it's gonna go down a little bit. Just went down $100.
Thank you so much.
We'll do that for you from the White House, all right?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's you just pass out money that isn't yours. Like, it's not, this is a good thing. It's totally Trump.
All right, bye. Nice seeing you, everybody.
Bye-bye, it's me, Donald Trump. I just passing out, you know, random notes of currency, not even knowing how much your bill is, and, you know, whatever. Whatever you do with it is up to you. I don't know. I'm just giving you $100 is all. Because that's the kind of guy I am. I'm Daddy freaking Warbucks, right? I'm the guy in the Monopoly board. So this is this guy's letter here. This was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump but I am sorry I failed you. So this was afterwards. I thought this was something they discovered that he wrote before. So this is what they're saying this guy wrote afterwards. So this guy was so stupid, you know, all they had him on was some illegal weapons possession, some other things. He didn't take a shot. He was sitting in the woods. He was trespassing. He had guns, right? And, you know, and he could have been, you know, trying to kill Trump. But they didn't have him firing bullets. So he hadn't, you know, he might have had a plan, right? He had things on him that would indicate that he was a threat to Trump, right? But, you know, dear world, dear world. So this is what he wrote, right? So a guy who could put together a plan like this, the guy who could go do GoFundMe, I mean, he's obviously crazy and, you know, whatever. I mean, based on this persona that they've given this guy, right? Okay, so they've created a character here, right? And this character has the ability to do GoFundMe projects, GoFundMe campaigns for people in the Ukraine. He makes it to the Ukraine. He runs a number of businesses. He has business interests in Hawaii and in North Carolina. He can fly to these places and do these things, right? This is a person who's like, seems like some kind of entrepreneur, right? He's crazy in terms of their profile they've created, but he's capable of abstract thought and, you know, doing all the things that he's done, like in terms of the profile they've created. And he could have returned fire. So the story is that Secret Service fired on him and he could return fire, but instead he dropped his shit and he ran, and then he wanted not to get caught, right? Like, he didn't turn himself in. And so he decided to leave this incriminating letter. You know, he was very calm when they arrested him. And so he decided to leave this incriminating letter. It says this was an assassination attempt. Dear world, this was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump. But I am so sorry I failed you. I tried my best and gave it all that gumption I could muster. He gave it all the gumption he could muster. It is up to you now to finish the job. I will offer $150,000 to, this is a guy who has money, as a property in Hawaii, right? $150,000 to whomever can complete the job. I wouldn't take him up on that. I don't think he'll be able to pay you, right? And so now they're charging him with attempted, from everyone across the globe, from the youngest to the oldest, know that Trump is right to be anything, is unfit to be anything, much less U.S. president. And the U.S. president must, at bare minimum, have somebody with moral fabric that is, I just make this a little bit smaller, that is America, the moral fabric that is America, and be kind, caring, and selfless, and always stand up for humanity. Trump fails to understand any of this. I guess it gets cut off here. The photo does, it's not a perfect photo here. But anyways, they're saying that this is him just regurgitating left-leaning media. You know, Trump does suck, you know, but not to the point where you would do something like this. But it just looks fake as fuck. Like, this is just a stupid move. What person would, you know, who's going to run away from the crime and flee and not try to get caught would not realize that, you know, and not talk when he gets arrested, would do something where he says this right here. This is an assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Like, then now you've, you know, now they're going to charge him with that crime because of this letter. And, you know, it's just stupid. Like, it's just stupid. Like, the whole thing. Right? And, you know, this guy's just, I mean, he's obviously some sort of an asset that they're putting out, like an actor or whatever. Kamala Harris said she worked her ass off under ex-lover Mayor Willie Brown, but new information about her time there reveals the truth. I'm sure she worked her ass off. Like, that's, she used those exact words. I bet she also worked her mouth and knees off, right? Kamala Harris was frequently absent from California Medical Assistant Commission meetings, even though she was appointed to the position by her boyfriend at the time, and then the then Assembly Speaker Willie Brown. Harris and Brown dated for about a year when she was 29-year-old lawyer for the district attorney's office, and he was the powerful speaker who ran for mayor of San Francisco at age 60. Brown appointed Harris to the CMAC position in 1984, drawing some criticism for impropriety despite Brown's willingness to publicly flaunt accusations of political patronage. Harris had already served 6 months on the Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board, a job that paid $97,000, but resigned to take the new position with CMAC. It's unclear why Harris missed so many meetings as she took leave from her job at the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, according to Los Angeles Times. And so, you know, there she is, right? I thought that they dated for longer. Harris was absent for more than 20% of the meetings, according to Daily Mail review of the committee minutes. On other occasions, the minutes reveal that Harris arrived after commissioners started the meetings and already conducted some of their own business. It talks about her just not doing her job, like this is like a Hunter Biden thing, right? Where Hunter Biden was being paid by a Ukrainian gas company and he never went there, and there's no evidence he did any sort of work at all or knew anything about what they did, other than be the son of the vice president who was in charge of, you know, $1 billion of aid that was going to the country, but still paid Harris a great deal of money, even though she didn't do her job. The $100,000, according to the report, all told, Harris made more than $400,000 over a 5-year period. She was appointed by Brown to state positions. So she was given all these cushy jobs, one better than the other, was building a resume and a career because she worked her ass off for this guy, right? A guy who was twice her age and, you know, who was totally willing to monetize his position of power to get some poontang. Harris was fiercely defensive of her role on the board when she was campaigned for district attorney of San Francisco, insisting she did the work despite questions about whether she earned the position that Brown had appointed her to. So this came up. She was running for district attorney, and it came up because of course it would. Whether you agree or disagree with the system, I did the work, she told San Francisco Weekly magazine in 2003 profile. Well, I worked, she said. I worked my ass off for everything I have. Well, yeah. Yeah, you did. Yes, I may have influenced her career by appointing her to 2 state commissions when I was assembly speaker. He acknowledged, the guy said. He acknowledged it's just what happened. Like there's, you know, there they are, right? Like he is an old 60-year-old man and she's, you know, a 29-year-old woman, right? I mean, there's, you know, why would she be with him if there wasn't some, you know, I mean, especially the kind of person she is. She's a person who's climbing upward, an upward climber. And, you know, that's how she got where she is. I mean, Trump, the same thing with his dad. You know, these people in power, they all have a story like this. Like something, like she's, you know, hers is like more of being a prostitute, but they all prostitute themselves in one way or another. They have to sell out to somebody of power. You know, they have to give something, whether it's going to be, you know, I mean, as a politician, you have to have power behind you, and you're going to give them something, right? You're going to, you know, the people that are going to put you in this position are getting something from you, right? The power brokers. Okay, so I just got to break in here. Today's Wednesday, September 25th. The video will be up tomorrow. Then tomorrow I'll start. Kamala did an interview. There's a big report condemning the Secret Service for their handling of the Trump thing, which is obviously just so effed up that, and like, nobody was in charge, a bunch of stuff. Like, it's just like completely, you know, everything you would think from something that's a staged event that compromises the Secret Service. Plus, there's another report that Secret Service agent sexually harassed one of Kamala Harris's staff members, so that's happening. And Joe Biden was on The View. So all that stuff will be in my next video. But something wonderful happened right before I went to the dentist, and I taped like 4 CNN shows because it's a CNN promotion, and it's so hilariously bad. I had to show you it here. I mean, I fast forwarded through 4 hours of CNN This is how bad I wanted to show you this.
The wait is over. Tim Walz and J.D. Vance in their first and only face-to-face debate.
Are you shitting me? When I first saw this, it didn't register that these MNFers just said, the wait is over for J.D. Vance and Tim Walz debate. Who the fuck is waiting for this thing? Who could possibly be saying, I can't wait to see this? Like, who in their right mind would be sitting on pins and needles waiting for this vice presidential debate? Let's watch that again.
The wait is over. Tim Walz and J.D. Vance in their first and only face-to-face debate. And CNN has it covered with the best political team in the business. A CNN special event, the vice presidential debate.
They have two ads, and that's the better of the two. I kept on seeing the other one, which is shorter. But for them to have the balls to say, the wait is over. The wait is fucking over. like who is sitting back and saying this is must-see TV? You know, it's like something you have to sit through. Like, I'm not watching it, right? There's going to be nothing of significance for me to cover. I'll get the highlights. It's not like a Trump debate and, you know, a Biden debate or something. I mean, it's just these two clowns, like, and their vice presidents, and the whole thing is, I mean, it's not as entertaining. The campaign hasn't been as entertaining as I hoped it would be. There's just, you know, they've done a good job of managing Kamala's unlikability, and Trump is, you know, kind of being a little bit funny, but mostly annoying. And so, you know, it hasn't really delivered. Okay, what's this woman doing here? That's just, I don't know how that helmet's just sort of floating above her head there. Former president holds campaign event in Indiana, Pennsylvania. I guess 2 events. Is there an Indiana, Pennsylvania? I don't understand that, whatever it is.
That's what we are. We want to have strong borders, great education, school choice. Does everybody like school choice? We want to move the Department of Education. We're ranked at the bottom of the list, the worst. We spend more money per pupil than any other country by far, and yet we're at the bottom of the list. Out of 40, we're ranked about number 40. And I'm going to close the Department of Education and move education back to the states. And we're going to do it fast.
You know, like that, I don't know what that means. Like, does that mean he's going to cut all the budget and all the money that the federal government gives? Now, the federal government does do things. You know, they give money to the states, but the money comes on conditions of control, right? And you don't want the federal government controlling, you know, more. But that means that the states have to do a good job of educating their kids, and sometimes they're not held to any kind of a standard, right? And the money won't be given equally, right? The people who run the state will give the money to their, you know, the people that are like them, right? So, you know, whatever the state by state situation, the money won't go to the poor communities, or it will go all to the poor community. It'll be like one of those things, depending on which state you're in. And so, you know, like, corruption exists at every level. And it's worse at the smaller levels because there's not anybody really looking into it. You have people in a town who control all the, you know, all the avenues of self-investigation, and they're not followed by mainstream media, which sucks, you know, isn't really investigative, but the corruption at small town level can be much worse than at big governmental level because there's no oversight. But, you know, like, this is just Trump just throwing shit against a wall. Like, he has no idea the effects of closing down the Department of Education, right? And he's a person who wants more power. Like, holding the federal government, holding federal funds for education over states means you can control states to whatever extent, right? So, you know, if he was such a good person at hiring people, why wouldn't he hire a good staff at the Department of Education to run in a way that was efficient instead of getting rid of it altogether, and without any knowledge of how that would affect the states, right, on a state-by-state level?
Maybe I'll have you do that. I'll use Lee. Maybe I'll have you. You could do it. That's not too easy. We'll get somebody great. We'll get Lee Zeldin is here with us tonight.
Lee Zeldin. What nationality is Lee?
I think that's the job for Lee.
That's a job for
Vivek.
Lee.
Or we'll get somebody. We like Vivek. We need somebody with a lot of energy, a lot of strength, energy, and intelligence. But it takes centuries to build the unique character of each state. And we are going to. And you know, when you do that, so the #1 rated country is Norway. The #2 is like Denmark. And, you know, it's on and on.
Yeah, they're just small countries that have a lot of money and don't have a lot of poverty. And they don't have a lot of immigration and things like that, right? Forbes sucks at putting up these videos, like he's freezing left and right. But this is the one I want to get to here.
By next month, most people will have an option to vote early. That means most people in the whole country, by mail or in person. And the policy of actually enabling early voting dates all the way back to the mid-80s.
Okay, so they want to do early voting here. But here's Trump.
In the news, but in today's America, high turnout is not something that all politicians welcome equally. High turnout has driven Democratic victories. The Obama coalition famously trounced Republicans and flipped many states with high turnout. The Harris campaign sees high turnout as supersizing her odds of winning. And remember, more people have voted for the Democrat for the White House in 7 of the last 8 races, even when the Electoral College picked a different winner in the first elections for Trump and George W. Bush. A reminder that the nation actually consistently tips blue, and even more blue when turnout is high. So now that it's election month around the nation, Democrats...
So the title of this video is Meltdown. Trump admits high turnout means losing as Harris embraces election something. It gets cut off. You know, here is him saying that if you can get people out to vote, the people who are resistant to voting will vote Democrat. Like the people who may or may not vote will vote Democratic. And let me come back to that.
Donald Trump had a sense that all this would hurt him more than help him. He tried to trash early voting as a general matter, openly admitting the reasoning. He wasn't saying this was a policy thing or he was thinking about whether soldiers would be able to vote or any of those high-minded considerations I mentioned. No, he just thought he might lose if everyone participated, like the sound I just played for you.
This is the sound he just played.
They had things, levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again.
Their bill would make Election Day a new paid holiday for government workers. A power grab that's smelling more and more like exactly what it is.
Okay, so, but Trump could mean there that there'd be cheating and they would be, you know, all this stuff, right? But let me just switch over to voiceover here. So I watched this football ad. We also watched a football game, and football players were explaining why you should vote, how you should vote, you know, why and how you should vote, right? You know, so, and they do this with the get out the vote. You know, there's always these celebrities and people that do this, right? And if you have to explain to people why they should vote. Now, I explain to people why they should not vote. It goes through stages. Like you could jump stages, but this is not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about people who have the intellectual capacity to watch my videos and have me explain to them the left-right paradigm. You know, first you have to invest in the system and take some interest in your government, right, and understand, you know, what democracy is supposed to represent. And I don't think democracy is good. I talk about people sucking. I did a whole introduction about the low level of consciousness that's out there. But if you have to explain to people how to vote and why to vote, then they shouldn't vote. Like if they need celebrities and athletes and celebrities who are, you know, amongst the most superficial and dumb people, and you have to have those people go out and explain to you and motivate you to vote for somebody, usually it's going to be a Democrat, then you shouldn't vote. Like you don't know what's going on. Like if you don't, you know, feel some sort of passion about the political system and you're not taking any kind of interest in your government, then you shouldn't vote, right? Like you're not even, I mean, your vote counts as much as somebody who does a lot of research and puts a lot of thought and energy into their vote and takes their vote seriously and would never think not to vote, right? Like you have people who really, you know, cherish the democratic system and they really, invested in it. And you have people who are so low functioning that they don't know how or what or why to vote, and they have to be, oh, I saw a football player talking about, I'm going to do it. I'm going to vote for who they do, No awareness at all of what's going on in their country. And, if those people can't, it's very easy to vote. The reason I say not to vote isn't anything to do with how easy or hard it is. I don't tell people not to vote. I give my opinion of it. It doesn't mean anything. I don't care if people vote or not. It means nothing. Like, there'll be small differences. The difference is whether you're going to sit and watch, a Trump debacle where there's all this hatred and all the rest of it, that goes with Trump. All the division, all the, passion on Trump's side, passion on either side of the Trump equation, the Trump obsession, the lawsuits, the constant talking about on the news media, all the stuff that goes along with Trump, and all the failure and all the braggadocious stuff that Trump does. Or you got Kamala Harris as a complete disaster as well at her own level. And so, it's just what you want. Maybe there's a few small policy differences, right? Most of the stuff's just going to happen anyway. It's going to happen the way it's going to happen. We've reached that point where, the chance of, there's a point like if you are caught in the current going to Niagara Falls, there's a point beyond where you have no chance. Like, your boat, there's not a boat fast enough or more powerful enough to fight the current off and go in the other direction, right? Like, you're just rushing to the edge of the falls. Like, you're going over, right? Like, that's where we are now. Nothing we do is going to stop us from going over the waterfall. Like, it's just, or the cliff in this sense. There are some small policy differences. Kamala Harris and she has a team, and Trump has a team, and they have their executive order things they do, but most of it won't really affect you, in any real major way. It won't affect most people, maybe a little bit. And then they have different handlers, and they have different power brokers, and those people will push for whatever. But the president doesn't pass laws. The president signs bills that go through Congress. So there's not going to be much of these big scale changes. It's just really the personality that you have on who's out there. That's the bully pulpit, the bully pulpit. But anyways, there isn't much of anything. And if you hope that one person's going to save America, either you're Democratic or Republican, you're deluding yourself. That's the point. Vote if you want to, whatever it is. Like, everyone has whatever they choose to do, that's fine. But don't delude yourself into believing that something's going to happen that isn't. And prepare for the worst. At least most people get that the apocalypse is on the table. It's a possibility, and everybody has to start, adjusting themselves to the idea that their lifestyle in America, as you know it, is not going to be the same in the next 4 years, next 8 years, next 10 years, next 20 years, or even tomorrow. Like, it could be, major changes are coming. And they're not, in terms of your lifestyle, are not good changes. But like I said, that's more sophisticated line of thought. In terms of just needing, celebrity or a ground game from the Democrats, more often the ground game of the Democrats, to get people out and vote that aren't going to vote and who really don't really know much of anything. They haven't, they're not watching the news, which is, again, if you're on a higher level of consciousness, not watching the news, when you recognize the news is bullshit, right? And you understand that the media's been compromised, but that's not why they're not watching the news. They're not watching the news because they're watching Jerry Springer, whatever, like whatever the reality TV show crap that they watch, whatever it is, the low level, The Bachelor or something, whatever. They're not, they're watching the Kardashians. And so if you don't know how to vote and you need some political party to come pick you up and get you registered and, get you in there because they think you're going to likely vote for Kamala, and, it could be the same for the Republicans, but at least the Republicans, they actually vote out the maximum amount of people. It's just that there's less people. Like, the people who aren't going to vote will tend to vote Democratic, right? But those people shouldn't vote because they don't know anything. They're not making an informed decision. They're not using critical thinking skills. They don't value their vote, and they don't have the ability to do it on their own. And so that should exclude them. It should be hard to vote. Like, it should take a little bit of effort to vote, right? If if you have a small bureaucratic hurdle that makes it a little bit hard that you have to do something to vote, fuck it. I gotta go and get a driver's license or an ID. Yeah, fuck that. Like you don't have an ID, then what right do you have to vote, right? Yeah, I don't want to go, and I gotta go all the way down. Look at the line. Look at the line. Oh my God, look at that line. It's at least 15 minutes to go in there. I don't want to go do that. Drive 10 minutes over to the school. I don't want to look at the parking lot. I'm gonna have to walk all that way from the parking lot to the thing. It's not worth it. If you're like that, you shouldn't vote, right? Like there should be hurdles. It should be a little bit hard. Like they shouldn't make it too easy to vote, right? I mean, I gotta fill out a whole form. Oh, fuck that! Like, look at this thing. I gotta get a pen and I don't even have a pen. I don't fucking have a pen. I'm not voting. Fuck voting. And so if like that's your level of participation, then you shouldn't participate. Like it should be something that you value and like is. I mean, people in other countries wish they had the right to vote, wish they had some say in their government. I talk about how democracy is it's not the best version of, it's none of these things are good. I mean, none of these different, all the various, communism, all these various types of governments they have, voting and elections and things isn't, we see the results. Look at the politicians you have. Look at the way money influences the political process, right? On a local level, sure. The local level makes a lot more difference than the higher levels, and people don't care about their local elections. So they don't even know who their local politicians are. They could actually have access to them, and they could actually influence them. And a little donation and things like that can make a difference in somebody who's like more organic getting elected. People don't even know. That's why they call it down ballot races, because people are concerned with the rig elections that are on the federal level, but don't concern themselves with the local mayor or who runs the police department or any of these things, the Board of Education, which really affect your lives, right? But even then, it's just, political bullshit, right? So, I mean, people who get that. But the people who, are just too lazy to vote, they shouldn't vote. Like they shouldn't be the people determining the outcome. And that's what it is, right? It's the people who are most resistant to picking a fucking side, who are sitting on a fence and can't tell the difference between two, at least on paper, polarizing candidates, right, and parties, and they can't make a decision, or that they're too lazy to vote, and they have to be helped in some way to vote. Like if you need help to vote, then you shouldn't vote, right? If somebody's crippled or they have some kind of physical disabilities or old, they can't drive, yeah, sure, someone giving them a ride, but they really want to vote, they just have some issues. But the people who really have to be pushed into voting because they're too lazy and too pathetic to participate in the system and the government, kind of know what's going on, then they shouldn't vote. Like they shouldn't decide who gets to be the president, right? Like there was a movie, I think it was Kevin Costner was the guy, and it was like his one vote would determine the president, right? It's like something like that. His ballot got messed up, and like whatever he was, like there was a tie, and his vote was going to be the deciding vote, would determine who was the president. Like it's kind of an interesting, plot to a movie. But I think the movie sucked anyway. But either way, this idea that somebody who doesn't really care and doesn't really know would be the people who are, the least invested in the system determine your president. Okay, so I covered some of this Apple Intelligence. They're putting AI on your phone, and they're billing it as, Siri sucks. Like Siri just doesn't work well, but they're billing it as something where your phone's going to be more sensitive to your needs. And I just saw kind of a good movie called The Age of the Pods or something like this. I saw it on Hulu. It was about having a baby in a pod. It was kind of, the movie could have been like half as long as it was. It was kind of interesting. About having an artificial womb to have your baby, the whole thing. But it was about this kind of thing where, that they had all these devices that were AI devices that were doing more and more for people, and people were becoming obsolete to the point where the AI was creating art and kids were commenting on the art like that instead of doing the art themselves, right? But, you know, they're putting AI on your phone, and, you know, I mean, mostly it's probably going to be a bad thing. It might be helpful to some extent, but, you know, probably in the long term it'll be bad. And this is their commercial, Verizon's commercial here.
Look, I got the new iPhone 16 Pro at Verizon. Apple Intelligence is pretty awesome.
Nice.
You can get
Pretty
it
often.
when you trade in any phone.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
You know, just bizarre idea for a commercial. Your phones want to get traded away and go. They don't want to be used by you anymore. Your phone's sick of you, and they just say, yeah, switch it out and give them a iPhone 16 with Apple Intelligence.
At Verizon, new and existing customers can get iPhone 16 Pro on us when you trade in any phone in any condition.
Boom. You get a free one. So, you know, your phone wants to kill itself. Speaking of somebody wants to kill themselves, John Federman has made I haven't watched this yet, but he's being interviewed here.
Senator Fetterman, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Hi, it's great to be here. Hi.
Well,
You're just like so enthusiastic, Fetterman.
It is great to have you. Let's start with the results of our NBC News poll, which shows that Vice President Harris is leading former President Trump by 5 points nationally. Still, almost 2/3 of voters say household incomes are falling behind compared to inflation. Why should Pennsylvania voters trust that Harris can turn things around when so many voters say they don't feel the results of the Biden-Harris policies, Senator?
Yeah, well, it's a 5 points, so I mean that's encouraging. But now I'm not going to say, well, now I don't have to drive for 4.5 hours to have with a rally for Democrats and
have with a rally. So he's just, I mean, the guy can't talk. His job is talking. It certainly isn't thinking. He has to have some sort of a computer, like we saw in The View, where he has to have like a tablet to process conversations. Like he can't hear people. He says that when people talk to him, it sounds like the adults on Charlie Brown. Whoa, wah, 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 wah. He can't understand what's going on. So he has to process things through a tablet. And this guy is a senator, right? I mean, he showed this in a debate. That's how bad and unlikable Dr. Oz is, that he lost to this guy. And the guy, you know, I mean, you remember what happened with him. He got sworn in and he got immediately depressed and was suicidal. He couldn't get out of bed. His kids were wondering what's wrong with him. He missed birthdays and holidays. He was admitted to a psych ward after having a stroke. And, you know, he had all these emotional issues. And he couldn't do his job for 3 months. He showed back up, refused to wear a suit, even though everyone else dresses that way. And he was leading meetings and he couldn't articulate things. And he was elected senator, and they're talking to this guy like he can talk, right? He's like, you know, I mean, you could get an orangutan to do a better job.
Rural counties. So it's going to be very close, and you're going to see the polls. The Washington Post had a poll that I think is effectively tied, and the other kinds, just like yours, has Harris up. But regardless, I promise you, Pennsylvania is going to be very close, and otherwise, if it's not, it's going to be a great, nice surprise. But I'm expecting a very close and very competitive race through.
Yeah,
through what?
Usually is in Pennsylvania. I want to shift now to North Carolina, another incredibly competitive state. Mark Robinson, the Republican nominee for governor, as you know, there reportedly made incredibly controversial posts on a pornographic website. Now, he's denied making those posts. Former President Trump has not dropped his endorsement of Robinson. And I wonder if you think it is fair for...
Look at that. Watch him do that. Watch that again.
Making those posts. Former President Trump has not dropped his endorsement of Robinson. And I wonder if you think it is fair for voters...
There's a smile from Federman. I don't think I've ever seen him smile before.
...to judge a candidate based on who they endorse, Senator.
Well, of course, but I mean, it's great news for the Democrats. I mean, Robinson is actually he's the new dream candidate to run against. Back in 2018.
Yeah, like you aren't that. You can't talk, right? Like like you can't process things. You can't do what job could he have? Like he couldn't work at a supermarket. Like when the customer came in, and he used to look at a tablet to understand what's going on around him, right? He has brain processing issues. Like he's worse. As bad as Joe Biden's debate was, his was much worse. Like he just came off a stroke, sure, but he hasn't gotten better. He's got emotional issues. He's stupid, and he didn't talk well before that. He wasn't somebody that was a good public speaker and someone who was good in debating. And he gets nervous, and he can't run meetings. He can't do anything. And he's, he might win again. We don't know. Like he'll be. I mean, 2 years from now, and he'll be. Up. His seat will be up for re-election. The Democrats must be bumming that they got this piece of shit, right? But he could win. Like, who knows? Like, this is how bad things are.
I thought the Governor Wolf and I thought Scott Wagner was the dream candidate we could run, and we smoked him by 17 points. And then, of course, Doug Mastriano came on in 22, and that's the best kind of Republican candidate that you could buy. And the Shapiro campaign
you could buy
millions of dollars to promote him as well too. But then Robinson's like, hey, hold my beer. And now, of course, Trump's not going to.
You made it sound like that made sense, and then you said hold my beer as a joke at the end of that.
Walk back just because he's never going to admit what a disaster that is. But it's nice to know that he's going to win probably as a Democratic governor, but I'm not sure the impact that it will have at the top line. But it would be wonderful and almost ball game if Harris wins North Carolina. But she's made North Carolina competitive already. And then after Robinson, now we're in the best possible situation to win.
Let me ask.
Yeah, thanks. That was brilliant, bro.
Ask you about another topic. The second apparent assassination attempt against former President Trump this week. This is what his running mate, J.D. Vance, had to say in the wake of it. Take a look.
The big difference between conservatives and liberals is that no one has tried to kill Kamala Harris in the last couple of months.
Okay, so you're categorizing the. We don't know what the first guy was. The first guy, we don't know if he's Democrat, Republican. He was just a patsy. No, almost nothing about him, other than he wanted to shoot Trump, and everything else is kind of vague. But he certainly wasn't a liberal or a Democrat. And this last guy voted for Trump. And he regretted his vote, but he voted for him. So he had once voted for Trump, right? And then he regretted his vote. And so, you can't call that guy a liberal either. Anybody who votes for Trump, you can't call them a liberal. And so that's not, it's just lies.
And 2 people now have tried to kill Donald Trump in the last couple of months. I'd say that's pretty.
Come on, let's just be like, you just suck.
Strong evidence that the left needs to tone down the rhetoric and needs to cut this crap out. Somebody's going to get hurt.
Cut the crap out. Cut it out.
By it.
Senator, what's your response to Senator J.D. Vance?
I don't know who's actually listening to what Vance says. It's been months already. No one's not really listening to him anymore.
No one's not really listening? Look, this is a triple negative here.
It's been months already. No one's not really listening to him anymore.
No one's not really listening to him. So nobody's not really listening to him. So somebody is really listening to him. It's hard to figure out where he's going with things. I mean, he wants to say nobody's listening to him. That's all you had to say. You could have said nobody's fucking listening to him, but you said this instead.
To Senator J.D. Vance.
I don't know who's actually listening to what Vance says. It's been months already. No one's not really listening to him anymore.
But somebody did listen to him before.
He has developed a kind of reputation to say dumb things, pointless things, and offend everybody.
Really?
And he's been picked as the most unpopular pick in history, but no one's listening to him. I'm certainly not. And we are right now.
Yes, here we are.
To the substance of his charge, though, I'd say that's pretty strong evidence that the left needs to tone down the rhetoric and needs to cut this blank out. How do you respond to that specific part of what he says?
Now, that's absolutely absurd. Every Democrat condemned the assassination attempts, and I did as well, too.
He did as well, too. That's his go-to line, as well, too. And I'm not sure what, he could mean also, just two. I did too, but he has that as well because he can't frickin' talk, right? He can't process things. His brain doesn't work right. His mind does not work right, and he's a senator.
And they're talking about eating the dogs and saying outlandish kind of things. Now let's just have a serious conversation about this election, not talking about that kind of empty kind of rhetoric from somebody like J.D. Vance.
I want to
exactly. Dog eaters.
Ask you about something that Vice President Kamala Harris said this week. She was talking about gun ownership with Oprah Winfrey. She said, quote, "If somebody breaks into my house, they're going to get shot. You, Senator, are a gun owner."
Oh my God, this guy owns a gun.
The leader of a party that prides itself on advocating for gun safety, was it responsible for Vice President Harris to make those comments?
Somebody commented that in California, the person has to basically be shooting at you for you to shoot them, or you'll be killed. They could break into your house, and they could, threaten you, and you can't shoot them. I mean, they're just not allowing you to protect yourself there. So if someone just broke into her house, and the person was unarmed, and she shot him, that would be a felony, and she would be going to jail for murder or whatever California laws say about it, right?
Absolutely. I think the vast majority of Americans, if you had somebody breaking into your house that might be there to harm you, you probably have the right to shoot them. And I think that's a vast majority of Americans would agree with that.
All right, well, let me talk about another big issue, I should say, in your state, the issue of fracking. I know you've talked about this quite a bit. Vice President Harris, as you know, once supported a ban on...
It's just crazy with fracking talk. Well, do I got to talk about fracking again? Not fracking.
Fracking when she was running for president in 2020. She even sued the Obama administration to prevent fracking off California's coast. Now she says she will not ban the practice as president. Why should voters trust that that is really what the vice president believes?
It's so strange why we just keep talking about fracking.
It's enough about fracking.
Back in 2020, I said that that might be an issue, but it's not going to be a defining issue. And now in 2024, we're still trying to talk about fracking. And now
we still are. Why are we talking about fracking? Who the frack cares?
The other side, they're talking about eating cats and geese and dogs and saying absurd things. And
not fracking. You can don't talk about eating. You can frack a goose. You can frack a dog, but don't talk about eating it.
And talking about how if Trump doesn't win, he said that, you have to blame the Jews on that, and just absurd things, like having a serious policy conversation when the other side is just absolutely on fire. And here's where we are, and here we are also that it's going to be very close in Pennsylvania, and it's not.
Again, he can't construct freaking sentences. I mean, it's much worse than Joe Biden, and he's young, and they were talking about him as being potentially running for president because he appeals to some, his Fetterman smash, this ogre thing that he used to do before his brain melted down. And I had to cover that instead of the fact that he looked like Lurch and acted like, looked like Gru and, and George the Animal Steel and all these other, thug-like people. But his brain is like dysfunctional. Like it's not even his size. It isn't the fact that he doesn't want to wear suits. I don't care about the suits. I don't like to wear suits. To me are stupid, especially ties. Ties are pointless. But either way,
going to be defined by fracking.
Well, we are talking about it because, of course, it supported 120,000 jobs back in 2022. Let me read you some of what you have said about fracking. In 2016, you called it a stain on Pennsylvania. In 2018, you said you don't support fracking at all. But then in 2022, you said you absolutely support fracking.
So she's getting you like she set you up for this. She set you up, you piece of shit. What are you going to do?
Okay. Senator, what exactly do you like about fracking now?
It's strange for some weird gotcha, kind of taking quotes out of context, and you know.
It's strange for some sort of weird gotcha for taking quotes out of context. That was just wonderful sentence structure.
It's strange for some weird gotcha, kind of taking quotes out of context. And, you know, here I am now. I'm a United States Senator, and I won by 5 points, a record margin back in 22. And again, it might...
He won by 5 points. How bad did Dr. Oz suck? Like, Dr. Oz should be, I mean, he should be, like, just removed from any public discussion about anything. No TV shows, no presence on the internet. He shouldn't be allowed to do anything after losing to this guy. Like, he should just, they should put him like he should be a bubble boy. They should put him in a bubble somewhere, and just people could walk by and, like, he sits there like as human art, where people, like, in some, you know, like Central Park somewhere or something, where people can, you know, walk by and look at him, and the failure should sign, this guy lost to Fetterman.
Be an issue in fracking, and I fully support fracking. So does the Vice President Harris. And now, if you want to have a serious conversation about policy, then I would challenge Trump and Vance to have one other than talking about eating pets.
Pets? Is that what that's your go-to thing?
And we'll have plenty of questions for Senator Lindsey Graham. There's no doubt about that. But to the point, what do you now like about fracking? You say you're not going to ban it. You support it now.
Oh, they're eating dogs. They're eating cats.
Can you look at him? Look at him. He's happy.
You know, again. So okay, yes. And any more on fracking? I think.
Well, I want to ask you about the Middle East. Actually,
you didn't answer it. Okay, this is the.
Let's move on, because I do want to get this in. This week, as you know, a new front opened in the war in the Middle East, jeopardizing ceasefire talks. Senator Bernie Sanders accused Prime Minister Netanyahu of sabotaging a deal. Take a look at what he said.
Every time a deal appears close, Netanyahu moves the goalposts, introducing new demands and torpedoing the deal.
Yeah, because they want to get rid of the Palestinian people. Like, does anyone not know that yet? Like, they want Palestine. That's what this is about. And so a deal would mean, you know, it would be a path to a two-state solution, which is the opposite of what they want. And so they're not going to have any deal. They don't want the hostages back. They, you know, if they're, I mean, whatever that even is. And so Hamas is their, you know, their asset here. They want Palestine. They want Palestine. They want more than that. But they want, you know, Israel to be all of Israel and all of Palestine, and then maybe these other countries as they move forward.
It is clear to me that Netanyahu is prolonging the war in order to cling to power.
Senator, you have stood firmly behind Israel, but do you agree with any part of what your colleague, Senator Sanders, said there?
No, not at all. And I want to be very clear. I thought what Israel chose to do about blowing up the pagers and then walkie-talkies, and then after targeting
walkie-talkies, they're blowing up walkie-talkies,
and eliminating membership and leadership of Hezbollah, I absolutely support that. In fact, if anything, I love it. And
he loves it, you guys. My dogs are. Amazon just pulled in or something. My dogs are ready to bark here. You know, he got tagged by the liberals. He couldn't understand. He thought they were conservatives. He couldn't understand why they were so mad at him for his overwhelming support of Netanyahu in Israel. You know, he's Jewish. And so they were like savaging the guy, and the liberals, you know, these college kids, and he couldn't understand why, right? Like, he just doesn't have the ability to understand these things. He's so simplistic in his thinking. The woman was asking him a simple question: what do you like about fracking? And he could explain, you know, it's whatever, we need the gas, we need the energy. But like he said, the thing about they're eating cats or eating dogs, like, he just, you know, he can't do it, right? I mean, why are they allowing this guy to speak? Like, if they're hiding Joe Biden away, why would they let this motherfucker out there? I mean, he's an embarrassment. The Pennsylvanians, if they vote for this guy again, like, Pennsylvania should just, like, lose its state status, right? Like, you can't call that democracy. This guy can't frickin' conduct an interview, never mind do a job making decisions about laws and shit, right?
Israel demonstrated that they will not allow terrorists not to be held accountable. And I fully support that. And it's not about nothing that has what my colleague has said.
You mean like eating cats and dogs?
All right. Senator Fetterman, it is always great to talk to you. Really appreciate
Yeah. Is it really? How do you not laugh?
your being on this morning.
Thanks
Like, how do you not cover that? Like, the guy can't fucking speak. That this guy, you know, he's disabled, mentally disabled. How do you not cover that? He's a senator of a kind of important swing state, and you don't cover that? You don't say, my God, this guy can't do his job? Like, he's depressed on top of it. He has, you know, whatever happened in terms of his stroke, the guy's brain doesn't fucking function anymore, right? And you're just pretending it does. Like, it's, you know, it's hilariously sick, right? Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is going to be the end of a video I am making about voting being for dumb people. And it's the first audio for my Journey series 158, because it involves, well, some stuff that's tied to my last Journey series that I'm just uploading now, 157. The end of it, which I have an exchange with my brother, and all these things are tied into my being a truther and these things. Kind of interesting story. That involves the Heartfulness cult and just, you know, what I do here and the frustration of being somebody who sees stuff, right? But let me start off with the dentist. I went to the dentist yesterday, and there's some good news there. I made a separate video about I'm using this stuff called nanohypoxytrate. I'm not sure. I'm not pronouncing it right. My wife found this out. So what happened was, you know, I just had dental issues, plaque building up, just issues, where I had to get deep cleaning on my gums, and it's just a lot of x-rays and expensive trips to the dentist, you know, taking more trips to the dentist than, I mean, for years I didn't even go, right? And I was looking for a way to you know, make it so that if things break down and there's no dentist, that I can save my teeth. You know, your teeth are a big part of your whole, like there's, and again, this is just me talking about my situation. I'm not recommending anything. This is not, you know, there's no, you know, all the stuff, right? Like, I just tell what's going on with me. I'm not a person that recommends health things to other people, just, you know, my specific situation, and something for younger people to think about, right? And so, you know, I was flossing like crazy. I was doing everything I could do. I was researching anti-plaque toothpaste and things, because the plaque would build up on my gums, and my gums were like deteriorating. There's a whole thing. And so where this started was, I watched a video called The Smoking Teeth, and they used some sort of, you know, camera that was like an infrared camera or something, ultraviolet, you know, some kind of camera that picks things up that normally you wouldn't see. And they were taking a toothbrush and brushing over one of these metal fillings, the kind of metal fillings we all got back in the 70s. And when they did that, the tooth would smoke, like vapor would come off of it because of this, you know, it would outgas. And these fillings have mercury in them. And so you were leaching mercury, which you can't, it's hard to get out of your body, right? Which I'll talk about that in a bit. And so it's not good for you. Like, it's a bad thing. And I went and I looked in my mouth, and I saw I had all these metal fillings. And then something clicked, because I knew, like, when I was a kid, you know, my parents would give me like a quarter, which, you know, back when I grew up, I would walk to this guy's drugstore. There was, you know, where I lived, there was like a big road. There was Farmington Avenue and the Boulevard, and we were between these two roads that were kind of, you know, roads that got a lot of traffic, and then there was these residential roads in between it. And I'd cross over the Boulevard, and down the next road was this place called Park Avenue, Park Lane, and there's a place called Park Lane Pizza, which I've never found pizza better than Park Lane Pizza. It's this Greek kind of pizza. But I take a left instead of a right to go to the pizza place, and I would go to past this bar called Cypress Arms, and I have stories about that because our next door neighbor used to go there and get drunk, and a couple of guys, 3 guys were fighting on our front lawn that came out of that bar. Like, so I'd walk by this bar. I remember always walking by the bar and being like, you know, not necessarily scared but wary. And there was a guy named Perry who was a pharmacist, and Perry used to come out, and when we kids would go and like we go select candy or comic books, he'd come out and stand behind you to prevent you from shoplifting, which I didn't really understand. Like, I thought, oh well, he's just watching over the kids. But and then later on, like, some kid told me no, he's worried everyone's going to shoplift. And I thought, you know, he was like a good guy, is like an a-hole, which I guess I could understand because, you know, whatever, shoplifting. But I would not eat candy because it would make me sick. Like, I'd get it. Like, I ate candy when I was a kid, but I was like aware that if I ate too much of it, I wouldn't feel good. And you know, even when I got Halloween candy, I used to be moderate. Like, I've always been a moderate person. And whenever I was told I needed to give something up, like my mom said I should stop dairy because of allergies, I just stopped dairy. Like, I just was able to not, you know, eat anything with dairy or other things. Like, I could just give things up. Like, I've always been able to do that, no matter what it is. Like, just, you know, I drank chai for years, and I realized it was making my, you know, heart race after I had COVID, and I just stopped drinking it, and I was like, you know, I enjoyed it. Sometimes I enjoyed, right? But I could just give it up. And, you know, I brush my teeth regularly. So I'm looking in my mouth and seeing all this metal, and I remember going to my sister worked at a dentist, and I was like 25. I hadn't gone to the dentist in like so many years. And my parents said, you know, like they were going to pay for me to go to the dentist. I hadn't even thought about it. And because my sister worked there. And so I went there, and the woman was very, like, trying to tell me a story. You know, she said to me, she said, look, listen, if anybody wants to give you fill a cavity, get a second opinion, go to another dentist. You have great teeth. You just have to floss every other day and brush your teeth, and you shouldn't need any cavities. You shouldn't need anything. And I was like, well, that's a weird thing to say. But then I realized all my family had went there, and that he had screwed over my whole family and everybody that went to his office and filled cavities that weren't there. Because I had these right in the middle of my teeth. There was like, in all of them, like, it wasn't like one wasn't, you know, every single one of them had these toxic fillings in them, right? And this prick who was, you know, trying to, you know, line his bank account, you know, just fill cavities. I mean, what a horrible human being, right? You know, just to, you know, make more money, was putting what turned out to be toxic materials with mercury in them into my mouth and everyone's mouth that came to him, every kid, you know, whatever. Which now I have to deal with it as an adult, right? You know, think about how scummy people are, because he's not the only guy who's doing that. And, you know, that some other dentists would have to warn against dentists like this, you know, who are giving you cavities you don't have, right? You know, now they show it to you with the x-rays, or they have a camera or whatever it is, right? And so, you know, I've had this, you know, toxic material that's leaching out mercury and other, you know, toxins. But to get the fillings out, like I had read this article, this woman, you know, had 9 of these, you know, cavities, these, you know, these fillings in her mouth. And it was mostly the molars where he put the things in too, like not in other parts of the, you know, like he would just put it right in the center of the molar. And so she got these, I just flashed back there, but she got these fillings removed, and she died the next day because the dentist didn't know what they were doing, and they released all these, you know, chemicals and toxins, and she died of toxicity. So it's something that they have to really, you know, the way my dentist does it, they have this plastic guard that has like a hole in it which you can breathe through, but it mostly collects things. It has like some kind of vacuum on it, and they stick it like deep into your mouth. It's really uncomfortable. And then they take the filling out, and, you know, they're able to, you know, make sure that most of the particles don't go. I mean, you're still going to get some particles, you know. And I take activated charcoal, which is a thing that I take, again, not recommending something, but I have these pills that we have them powder for like it absorbs toxins, right? And so I take some of this, hoping that anything that bonds, any particles bonds with some of this stuff, so I can get it out of my body, and it doesn't find root in some part of my body. Like, this is what I have to deal with because of this prick, right? So I had some cavities and some dental issues recently. Like, I had no cavities for up until like my 50s. Like, I had one issue. I had one tooth removed because I got a bad cavity, but that was a tooth that I had to wear this headgear for when I had braces when I was a kid, and this headgear was a metal band that was around that tooth, and a rubber band that pushed, a big rubber band on the back of my head, and a big metal frame that would push these two teeth backwards, right? It's like, a whole, like, it's kind of barbaric. Like, dentistry is kind of brute force type of, like, it's not really medicine. And of course, with the fluoride treatments and all these things, which I don't get. Fluoride is a whole other thing. And so, I've been trying to figure out a way to reverse my, stuff with my teeth. And I got a couple of cavities, and I'm like working hard. I'm like, how do I get cavities? So I got 2 cavities that need to be filled, and another 2 cavities that were in the early stages. And I, said, what's going on, to the dentist. I'm like trying really hard to, I've done everything better, whatever. And, I like the dentists, again, they're doctors, and I don't trust the allopathic model, but, whatever. I was talking to him about it. And he said, well, you eat sugar. I'm like, no. He's like, you take lemon juice. And I go, well, yeah, I was drinking lemon juice and olive oil. One of my viewers suggested this. And a little bit of cayenne pepper and some salt. And like a little cup every morning, like a little shot of olive oil, and it's kind of gross. And lemon juice, my wife and I were doing it. And, it helps to get rid of a fatty liver, which did help. Like, my health got better. I felt like my liver improved. The liver is what is there for toxicity. And so the dentist says, well, lemon juice immediately softens your enamel for about half an hour. And if you brush your teeth, you'll brush the enamel off. And then, that's where I had all these cavities on my gum line. And I'm like, fuck, like, it's just constant battle, right? And so my wife went to look up what people were doing maybe she posted something on Reddit or something about my situation, and somebody recommended this nanohypoxytrate, which is basically the same material as your teeth. It's like 99%, like your teeth. And your teeth actually are looking to absorb nutrients, which, modern dentistry doesn't do it, doesn't talk about. But people in Japan have been using it, and they've, they particleize these nanoparticles into the toothpaste, and you brush your teeth and you leave it on, and it's supposed to remineralize your teeth, which I know the stuff is working, right? And so with that, my wife said, Sonicare. She was using these Sonicare toothbrushes, and I was like, I don't know, is that going to erode my gums? This whole thing. But I started using the Sonicare, and I liked it. And we went to Costco to get my wife a new toothbrush, so I do Sonicare. And it was right before Christmas, and they had these really powerful Sonicare that usually like $300, and they were only $10 more than the regular ones, and they were boasting 20% plaque removal. And we were like, do we really need that much more? Because how fast, like, these things just get more and more powerful, but then you're like, is it doing damage to the gum? We were like questioning it. But my wife got it anyway, and she got 2 toothbrushes, and I tried one because I did some research on it, and I was like, oh my God, it's like going to the dentist. Your mouth is so clean afterwards. And I started using that with this toothpaste, and I went back to the dentist, and they used to measure my, every year they measure my gums to see if there's gum erosion, and sometimes they have to do some deep clean underneath the gums, and they have to use Novocaine. It sucks. It's a whole thing. And the girl measured my gums and said, it's getting better. Like, she said, everything's getting better. And I was like, yeah, because I'm using this toothpaste, and I'm using the toothbrush. This dentist, dental assistant was good. Like, I'd had her a couple times. Like, they rotate them, but she had told me a different way to brush my teeth, which me and my wife were using. So, like, she was maybe more open to it, and like she was aware of the fluoride. It's on my chart. I don't want fluoride, but I always have to say it. But she would say it first, so whatever. So you say, I'm not going to give you fluoride because she said you don't want it. So she was more aware than some of these other people that drink the dental Kool-Aid. And she said, yeah, those toothbrushes are great. The ones that are this 20% plaque removal. And so I started watching these cavities because I could see 2 of them were on my gum line. There was one that was smaller, and that one went away. It's like I could see it the one that they said was turning into a cavity, and the other one was staying the same and maybe getting a little bit better, but there was a little black dot on it. And so, I was just wanting to see if I could just use this toothpaste, and it would absorb this material and re-enamelize my tooth and fix it. But like, there was some rot there that had to be scraped off, and I knew that I just was going to have to get them filled with the cavity. And the guy said there was 2 of these metal fillings that were eroding, and I was like, fuck, they're eroding. I looked at the pictures and I saw that the metal filling was like, a lot of it was, in the last 6 months it disappeared. And I'm like, this sucks, because all that stuff is now in my body, right? And so I went yesterday to get those things done, and they were going to do the metal fillings. I had 2 of them and replace them, and they were going to fill the 2 cavities. And I thought the 2 cavities, because I could see them, were on the gum line on the left side of my mouth. But the one cavity that had sort of fixed it, had been, the toothpaste had fixed, they're not even acknowledging anymore as a problem. So it actually worked. The toothpaste actually worked. It only could work on the one that wasn't as far gone. So they, but they put this plastic thing in my mouth, and this, there's better dental assistants, and there's a girl there that, was more aware. Like, she was like, oh yeah, these things are uncomfortable. And, like, it's just this big plastic thing. And he took out the 2 metal fillings and then, filled the other 2, and the other 2 are on my gum line. So it was on the top, top lip, like my lip went numb. I felt my lip blew up, like I was stung by a bee. I thought it was gigantic. I'm sitting there and my mouth's all, fucked up, with this stuff. And, and I'm like, and I asked the girl, and I'm like, the dental assistant, how many more metal fillings do I have? And she said 2. So I'm like down to 2. Like, I've gotten all the other ones removed, and like, that's a big relief, right? It's uncomfortable, and I mean, it's dealing with a problem that somebody else created out of greed, right? Like, I have 2 more to go, and they, and they have to take out some of the tooth when they take out the filling. So like, you get, a bigger hole in your tooth, and they replace it with this, whatever they do, this stuff, the resin. And now I have just, whatever and they'll find out in 20 years that that's also out, whatever it is. Like, I'm living with, whatever conditions that somebody's greed created in my mouth, for like a 7-8-year-old kid. Now I've, had to deal with this as an adult, and the expensive, dentistry that they have now, where they, they charge a lot of money to take the tooth out and then put a cavity in, right? So, but it's almost done. Like, it's, and so that was some relief. Like, I was like, well, at least, and the, I know that this toothpaste and the toothbrush are working. And I was also concerned that the toothbrush, which is putting out very powerful sonic vibrations, is making the fillings vibrate, and it's making those fillings, deteriorate faster and erode into my system. So, within a couple of months, I'll go back to the dentist, get these last 2 fillings out, and that'll be done, right? And so this ties into the story. So my brother wanted to contact me. He called me out of the blue. And I just thought about him and mentioned him in a non-positive way in a video, and I'm like, fuck, he wants to talk about, it's just going to be a sucky conversation, because he's really into this guy Dodgy, and he, the current master of the system. I told my brother about the Sajmarg meditation years ago. So I've been doing this meditation for years, which I talk about all the time here, and it's been transformative. And, it features this spiritual cleaning of your heart, and then the transmission that's given, this divine energy, which, has, again, it's changed not just my life, but my existence. It's more than a physical, it's not even a physical thing. It changes someone's internal world, cleansing them of their, their negative, whatever it is, tendencies, and, you know, all these things. And then this transmission is given that is, you know, God's love. Like, it's just, everyone needs God's love, and you get dosed by it. This stuff called Pranhuiti, right? Prana, you know, prana in your system is this creative force. Everyone has this, you know, spiritual energy, this prana. You know, there's this pranayana in yoga. And so I told my brother about this years ago. And my brother always thanks me because he ended up doing this, and he ended up being a caretaker at the ashram and just all these things. And, you know, he's had his own transformation. So he's always thanked me for telling him. You know, I went to his house years ago, his apartment, and he has 3 sons, the godfather to his youngest son. And, you know, who always just kind of a neat kid, probably my favorite member of my family, just in terms of his personality, relaxed. You know, he was, you know, just really cool and kind of chill. And we're sitting on a little dinghy boat fishing in a lake. He had an apartment that came with a lake in Great Barrington, New York, which is kind of an interesting place, right? And we were like, it was sunset, and I told him about Saj Marg, and I could feel the energy. Like, the Saj Marg system, you meditate like right before dawn is the best time to meditate in the morning. And then, you know, at night, at sunset, the idea is that there's a balance in the world at sunset and sunrise, and you can feel it. Like, there's a spiritual condition at sunset and sunrise. You know, this kind of a balance between dark and light, you know, this period of time. That's why people go out and watch the sunset, and you can feel it's relaxing and things. Take pictures of it. And the sunset was happening, and, you know, his name's Peter, you know, so Peter and Paul, like, this is kind of a, you know, my dad was Italian, my mom was Irish Catholic, you know, they're both Catholic, and that's just a thing. You know, if you ever see the Goodfellas, where they're going through, and his Jewish girlfriend is meeting all these Italian guys, the main character, and he, you know, the guy who recently died of weird circumstances, Ray Liotta, right? And so she's introducing, and all, like, you know, most of the people are named Peter or Paul, right? Like, it's just this thing. You know, the real life Peter and Paul had some conflict, you know, with their roles in developing Christianity. But anyways, I'm telling him about this thing. I feel the energy, and he tries it, and he sticks with it. And so he always is great. He says he's grateful all the time that I told him about it whenever we talk, and that was, you know, the one sort of positive thing. But mostly what he does is he would dump his complaints about the people in the system. He was very negative about it, and it's gone on for years. You know, and I recently started talking to him, about 2 years ago I started talking to him. I was kind of worried. You know, he's in his 70s. He's 17 years older than me. You know, he's getting older. And, you know, he's in contact with his 3 sons, but they live in Connecticut. He was in the ashram in Georgia, and he was going to get remarried, but that thing fell through. You know, he's been married, I believe, twice, and, you know, he's kind of a womanizer. Now he's in his 70s, and he's kind of dying alone. And, you know, it's kind of like, wanted to have some kind of emergency set up where, you know, I would be able to contact me, you know, these life alerts kind of thing. You know, I was concerned about him not having, you know, a support system. But, you know, I was limited what I could do. We had these conversations right when this, in the Saj Marg system, you know, they have this, in terms of the masters of the system, you know, every spiritual system, they want to leave behind the master. There's a person that reaches a high level of spiritual attainment, right? And, you know, usually it's just one guy, and then a bunch of sort of power hungry people. You know, first he maybe has some disciples like Jesus had, right? Jesus had like 12 disciples, and he made Peter in charge of his church, and St. Paul, who came in later, who never really knew Jesus, was kind of more spiritual than Peter. You know, Peter was the rock that Jesus said he wanted to build his church, but Jesus didn't leave a successor. He wasn't able to transmit his essence and leave somebody who was on his level behind, right? Which is, you know, the ideal situation. A lot of these spiritual traditions in India, they have this sort of, you know, these legacy people, and they have these lines of, you know, gurus and masters, but, you know, it's usually the first guy's the best guy, and then the people just become, he leaves behind some people who are semi-spiritual, you know, who aren't as good as him. they're not on his level, right? That's the problem with sainthood. It just dies with the saint, somebody who's spiritual. But in the Sajmarg system, because there's this transmission, the master of the system can transmit his essence into his successor. And so in the Sajmarg system, there had been 3, valid spiritual masters. I only knew the third one. And they were legitimate spiritual masters in the sense that they were there to serve you. These cults, you see, these people serve the person, right? In many different ways, propping the person up financially and, rendering personal service. This idea of almost like they're slaves. The cult members are slave to this, this guru, this master of the system. And in the Sajmarg system, there's none of that, right? Like the master of the system doesn't ask you for anything. There's like people can voluntarily donate to the mission, but the masters of the system have all donated more money. Like they donated, their time and effort and money. Like they do more for the system and more service than other people. Like Chargy worked endlessly to, help people. So I just went and ate breakfast and fixed a window issue that we had. A screen was down one of the upstairs. Anyway, I just want to. This is going somewhere, so this is actually there's a point here, kind of a neat point, but like understanding, like in the Catholic tradition, that the Pope was supposed to be, whatever the Pope was supposed to be, the embodiment of Jesus, right? Was supposed to be, this is what they want in all these religions. In the English, the Church of England, the sovereign is supposed to be God's representative on earth, right? And, to have a lineage, a system of where they pass on this divinity, this divine condition, your inner condition of what you are on the inside is the same. In the Sajmarg, they actually accomplished this through this transmission. It's like the first time this was where the masters, they were different in terms of their personalities, but through this transmission, like there was a special sitting that Babaji gave to Chargy. Chargy was the third master that I knew. Babaji was the second. When they were traveling together in Denmark airport, and it was a minute, sittings usually last a half hour, sittings of meditation, and there's transmission and cleaning given, but this one Babaji just transmitted his own condition into Chargy, and then Chargy had this master within him, right? And this person who becomes the master, they're given higher levels of spiritual attainment, but they have to give up their ego's ability to choose and do the wrong thing. They have to just surrender to God and just always do the right thing, right? And just be there for people. It's like people call the person master, right? They say, I used to call Chargy master. But really, the master's the slave in this kind of situation, the slave to your, your spiritual issues. Like the master is there to help you evolve and has to ride the frickin' roller coaster of your human depravity and your resistance to accepting divinity, right? Everyone could be a saint right now. Like everyone could be the highest version of themselves right now in a second. Like you could just, make that decision and do it. And your soul wants you to do it, and yet people don't do it. There's been very few spiritual people of any significance on planet Earth in hundreds of thousands of years. And so there's just a resistance to embracing your higher nature. In the Sajmarg system, the master is helping you do that. And the master, in the Sajmarg system, the master can never renounce you, even if you suck, like you go totally criminal. Like it just has to be there for you. But you can quit anytime you want, right? So it's a different kind of, when people think of a master relationship, they think of the master and if the person's a master, then you're a slave. And so it's tough for us Americans and people of the West to really understand. We have a resistance to spiritual gurus and things like this. And for me, it was always tough, even though the master of the system, like I knew he was like incredible. I knew the system was incredible just from my experiences, like my experiences with transmission, things like this. My initial sittings and things, I had these profound experiences, and I just knew this was the best thing ever, like Sajmarg. And I had to accept this kind of foreign, on an egotistical level, I had to accept this sort of master-disciple relationship, whatever it was. You know, I've always had problems with authority, and, you know, I learn, my learning style, because I'm dyslexic and introverted, is, you know, learn on my own. Like, you know, I never did well with coaches or teachers or things like this. Even if the teachers were great, like I do better just sort of going through my own, you know, having my own realizations. And the second master of the system, Babaji, was like this. Babaji didn't read other people's works. He just did everything internally. He didn't want to prejudice his internal experience with other philosophies and other people's. Like, he didn't read these books. He dropped out of school at a young age, and he got everything through his connection to divinity, which is, you know, which is an interesting way to go about it. And, you know, I'm kind of like that, not like nearly as, you know, evolves, but that's kind of, you know, my style as well. But he was a much better disciple. He was much better at that, you know, because he grew up in this culture, and it was kind of who he was as a person. Like in India, they all grow up in this culture of, you know, gurus and masters and things. It's, you know, it's egocentric and not ego-dystonic. That's a psychological term. It's something that is just familiar to people in India, and they just, you know, embrace it. Whereas Westerners struggle. And, you know, we accept teaching, and we read books, and we learn from people. We have coaches and teachers. But when it comes to spirituality, we think we can just do it on our own. And of course, there's a vast universe, internal universe, that you have to navigate. And Babaji, you know, he had, like, one person, some Western person came to him, and they were saying, well, I have difficulty with the idea of accepting a master. And Babaji said, the true master is really a sweeper, you know, a cleaner, and a servant, and serves God. So please accept me as your humble servant. Like, he didn't care if you called him master or not, or any of these things, right? A true master doesn't think of themselves as the master. They think as God as the master, right? So they don't, you know, they don't want, in fact, you know, these guys didn't want people to call them master. You know, in India, they touched the feet of these people. They would bow down and touch the feet of the master. And these guys said, you know, they kind of made that not, you know, something you could do. Charji ended up having like some broken toes, and then he had a leg issue. And like he had some physical, you know, problems, and these people would run up and charge and did weeping and bowing at his feet, and it was kind of fucked up, right? And they basically told people not to do that shit, right? Like, that was just performative, like surrender inside, like surrender to the divinity inside of you. But Charji himself said he never thought of himself as the master. He thought of, you know, his master as the master, or God, you know, and so, you know, when people would call him master, he didn't think of it like him, like he thought they were talking to the divinity that was coming through him. So it's an interesting system in that way, right? Where there's this idea of a master, but that master's serving you to help you connect to the divinity within you, and you're cooperating on your level. So Charji was dying, and he nominated this one guy to be his successor, and then that guy withdrew. And towards the end of his life, he had 3 years left. 2011, he died in the end of 2014. And he was older. He had physical issues. He went into a coma for about 3 months. I mean, he had a lot of these, you know, where he was not really functioning very well. And he nominated this guy, Kamlesh Patel, who I had some positive experiences with. You know, so many people had rejected the previous masters, right? Both Charji and Babaji had attempts on their lives. People tried to poison both of them. Charji actually took poison. He knew the person was poisoning him, and he ate it anyway just to show that they couldn't kill him, you know, like that, because he was protected divinely. But, you know, the poison had an effect on his body. His son gave a talk where, like, he had all these blisters. The poison was coming out of his body in blisters and things. And, you know, it's a big thing in India. There's a lot of poisoning going on. You know, but he was like, you know, he was still doing work. Like, Charji gave these sittings, these individual meditations. Like, one time he gave 24 of them, right? When you do these sittings, you know, I worked as a preceptor for a while. The person sits across from you, and you transmit to them, and you either get a visual image or an idea comes to your mind. You're looking for the divinity within the person, but you'll see things that are blocking their progress. And you have to, you know, imagine, you have to use your mind like you're imagining that this stuff's being cleaned out on an etheric level. So this is like spiritual grossness. And it's like, you know, let's say you're sweeping a floor with your mind. Like, imagine that you're sitting there cleaning your house. Like, you're going through all the things you would do to clean your house, you know, scrubbing the toilet, you know, doing these things, right? You're sitting there with your eyes closed, using your will force to clean this person's spiritual essence, you know, the grossness that's preventing them from, you know, whatever's, you know, preventing them from moving forward. And, you know, it takes effort. And, like, I could give 5 or 6 of these sittings, and then I'd be pretty fried. You know, it would feel good to give the sittings because you would receive some of the transmission. And, you know, the cleaning would happen, then there would be transmission. But Chargy once gave 24 of these sittings in one day, right? Like, he gave 7 group meditation satsans in one day. Incredible. Like, no one, I mean, most people could only give 1. Like, it's just, you know, his ability to work, and he only slept a couple hours a day, and he did all this administrative work. Like, his capacity for work, I spent some time with him, people who were around him all the time said they couldn't believe how much work he does. All the people he sees, he meets people, hundreds of people every day. He would respond to emails, like, you know, hundreds of emails every day he would respond to. I mean, his capacity for work is, like, legendary. Like, nobody has ever worked like he did, right? He just, you know, had this capacity. He was St. Paul in a previous life, so he had, you know, he had been a disciple and a, you know, spiritual person. You know, he did what he did for Christianity. He was a higher developed person when he did this, right? So he was a hard act to follow, but I was there in India, and I saw Kamlesh become the master. Like, I could see him transforming into the master. The guy was now known as Daji. So I fully accepted him. I saw that he was there. I had my own internal experiences. I worked towards being able to accept the next master because I didn't want to be one of these douchebags that resisted, you know, that people had personal grievances against Chargy and Babaji and or whatever it might be, you know, their inability to accept the next master. They thought they were going to be the master, some bullshit like that, right? And so there's been all these issues, you know, property issues, you know, just a lot of bad behavior. And these, you know, masters had to suffer all this shit, right? And so Chargy wanted to make sure that, you know, Babaji didn't do a good job of preparing people for Chargy being the successor. And Chargy battled these people for years. The kids tried to steal property. Babaji's kids tried to steal the ashram properties, and, you know, they wanted to inherit all this. You know, this was a, you know, a non-profit group that, you know, that there wasn't any personal ownership of anything. It was an organization, and, you know, the organization owned properties, and these kids tried to steal the properties. You know, this nightmare situation. It was really difficult. And so Daji started to do some fucked up shit. He created this thing called Heartfulness, which ended up being like a sort of a parent organization. And I've been told that he's moving all of the properties. Like, there's probably $1 billion now worth of ashrams that Chargy built, that were built on, you know, people's donation money, right? And Daji's trying to take these things and put them into like, he controls the Heartfulness thing, you know, exclusively, like where the Saj Mark thing is a collective, you know, organization. And so there was that, but, like, I just noticed things right off the bat, like, and I go through this exhaustively, and I end up sending my brother a message about this. But I saw all these fucked up things he was doing, and the most fucked up thing he was doing, like, some of these things were my personal interactions with him, and some of them were just things I saw. But then he was dissing his master, like, he was completely disrespecting his master Chargy, you know, the guy who was the previous master. And he was saying things like he wasn't, you know, he didn't make it to the brighter world, which is like, you know, where you go, and it's a whole, you know, it's like heaven in the Sajmark system. He said a bunch of fucked up things. And then he did a bunch of fucked up things. And I was talking to my brother about this, and my brother, like, he just doesn't listen to me. Like, you know, he thanks me all the time for telling him about Sajmark, but his story is that he thought I joined a cult, and he was trying to protect me. And, you know, I'm not sure if that's true, because he's kind of a bullshitter, and that wouldn't be like him. But he's trying to, you know, make sure that I didn't join a cult. So he tried the Sajmark system, and he didn't feel the transmission, but he stuck with it anyway, right? He was very negative about the system, but something made him stick. He ended up going to India and becoming, you know, all these things. So he became a preceptor, and he became the caretaker of the ashram. You know, my brother was a truther in his own right. You know, back in the, you know, 70s and 80s, he had a radio station. You know, there was this stuff that came out of the Vietnam War. You know, he was the CIA had him guard poppy fields, opium fields when he was in Vietnam. And a lot of these Vietnam veterans came back and were part of like a truth movement that started, with just the fringes of society. And he had this guy, Eustace Mullins, who wrote a bunch of books. He was one of the really original OG truthers. He had him my brother had him on his radio show, and he told me a bunch of these things, like, things about the Federal Reserve, some of the things that were known, that are some of the, things you just learned about being a truther. And so, he influenced me. He was a mentor. He's sort of like a second father figure. He's 17 years older than me. He was a great athlete, and I was, trying to play college basketball. My nephews were basketball players. They were more like my brothers. I had a nephew who was 6 years younger than me. And my next sibling is 10 years older than me, right? So my two younger nephews were closer to me in age than I was to my older sister, my older siblings. Like, they were all boomers, right? My brother and these, my three sisters, and, I'm Generation X. So, it was a little bit like a different kind of a setup. I lived with my brother for a little bit, and I'm grateful for his influence. Some of the stuff, I've developed an online personality. This is what I do. And some of that is my brother. Like, some of it is, he influenced me in that way. Some of it is Chargy. These are people I listen to, talk, and, they were both public speakers. Chargy gave a lot of public talks. My brother was a DJ. He was more outgoing. He's an extrovert. So some of the things that, like, I do here come from them. Like, they influence my personality and certainly what I do here professionally as a presenter on YouTube. And also his truther stuff, and like, we have similar personalities and inquisitive in that way, And so, my brother, I've been grateful for some of his, he was in some ways a teacher of mine, like, he's one of my teachers, right? But the problem is he would never listen to me. Like, I have, gone beyond him in the truth community. Like, I just know more, and I was kind of the smartest one in my family or whatever it is. My brother was always better than me at everything. Just because he's older and, he had lived his life. And, it wasn't like there was a competition, like he was somebody who was helping me, right? There was, whatever. But there was some jealousy there, my mom said, whatever. And there was jealousy when I started Saj Marg. Like, he wasn't as good at it, right? He couldn't feel the transmission. There was just these exchanges. Like, I talk about, like, how, I would always wonder if he felt something. Like, I was hoping he would feel something. And we were going to the ashram for the first time to meet Chargy, and I could just feel the energy. Like, it was just this intense experience. We were in the bus from the airport to Molina, Georgia, which is about, an hour and a half away from the airport. 2 hours, I don't know. It's a little bit of a drive. And we're in this bus transporting us, and my face is like pressed up against the window, and I can feel like this anticipation and the energy that, like, there's. And when I got to the ashram, the energy was spectacular. You could just, it was like heaven. And, like, the material manifestation of heaven, right? Just this blissful energy and spiritual condition. And I was like real excited. I'm like, you feel that, right? To my brother, like, I was hoping he would feel it. And he goes, look, asshole, I got 7 days, because it was a 7-day gathering, here in the shithole, and I don't want to hear your shit. But later he would become the caretaker, which was always humorous to me, right? And he would talk about how great the ashram was, but he wasn't as sensitive to the energy, and, there's a whole thing. And it was very negative. He complained all the time, dumped his complaints on me, and just whatever. It kind of was burdensome, but it was what it was, right? But, I had, gone beyond him in various ways, and I had learned things about health that would help him. We have the same biological makeup, right? We're, genetically similar. And I know all this stuff that I knew would help him. And he was having physical issues. Same thing with my mom. Like, I would say, I know, and I would come back with information, but they wouldn't listen to me, like, because they were older, and, they just didn't listen to me, right? Like, it's actually not just them. I'm even here on the YouTube, people come to this channel, and, like, I know stuff, right? And people don't listen to me, and it's fine. Like, I've just accepted it. Like, it's the whole idea, you do the work and leave the results to God. There's a character in the Battle of Troy, and I guess it was at Greece or Rome, Greece. And there's a character named Cassandra, and she has the ability to see the future, but nobody fucking listens to her, right? So she knows exactly what's going to happen. There's another character named Vidor, who there's two brothers who are kings, and Vidor is their brother, but he's like illegitimate. He's born to a maid, and he has the ability for divine vision, and he knows everything, but nobody fucking listens to him. Like, he can see everything, but nobody listens to him, right? It's very, very common, because people don't want to hear the truth. Like, they don't want to hear it, right? The whole thing with, you see that now with Trumpers. And my brother is like fanatical follower of the master. Like, he takes everything literally. I was telling this to my wife. You know how we have, Trump, when you criticize Trump, you have Trump derangement syndrome. TDS. I go, my brother has DDS. He has dodgy derangement syndrome. Like, or he would tell me I have dodgy derangement syndrome, right? Like, that's how it is when I started to question Dodgy's mastery. Like, I realized the guy wasn't great. He was just making he was stupid. Like, you said stupid shit all the time. And, he did things personally to me. I got kicked out of a gathering with my son because he made this stupid rule that kids couldn't go to gatherings, which he changed immediately when he first was made master of the system. It was just a bizarrely bad rule, and I wrote to him, and I think he's kind of a little bitch about these things, Dodgy is. And he, I think got mad at me for criticizing him. And I did it in a gentle way. Like, I was just like, this is, this was this rule, and this is how it affected me. And I don't know if that letter or, other people's feedback, I mean, he just does dumb shit, right? And then reverses it and pretends he never did it. But then gets, it's like his feelings hurt because, people aren't respecting him as the master because he sucks, right? So I'm talking to my brother about this stuff, and my brother is just all in, and he can't hear any of it. And, Dodgy, and I did this long voiceover to my brother, which so I don't want to go through this stuff again, but, I went to a gathering in America, and Dodgy just walked by me like he didn't know me. And it seemed like he took my ex's side in the divorce and also that letter I wrote him, and he was, just being a little bitch about it, like just not a master. The masters of the system also have a human side, and it's easy for people to see the human side, especially if they're too close to them, because they're human beings and they're going to have their idiosyncratic behaviors and these things. And I try to overlook these things that he did. It isn't like they become a great master on day one. It's a new job, and they have to learn to be a master. And, people expect them to be something, like everyone has their version of what a godly person or a saint should act like. And it's never that. Like, it's people think it's being nice and kind and, just above everything, and just, it's not that at all, right? It's somebody who's willing to do whatever God wants him to do. And a lot of that work is destructive, especially now. And so, people are, when they see the master as a human being, it becomes a problem. And then there's people who just see the person as divine, and they can't see through the human flaws and its, possible mistakes and, the part of the person that's an ego. And so, each person has to, like, navigate this themselves. But the red flag for me was the way that Dodgy was treating his former master. He was clearly just dissing the guy and wasn't grateful for all that he got from him. Wasn't talking about him. When he did talk about him, it was usually negative. It's passive aggressive. And that just can't be, right? Like, it's the opposite has to be there. And, with his stupid decisions, and I was telling people about heartfulness, and, some of you guys were trying the system, and you would watch videos of Dodgy, and he would just say stupid shit. And then they made this, and he put this guy in charge of the video, of the YouTube channel, who was a guy that he had reprimanded. Like, I talked to a senior member, and this guy is just a real, like, dope, and kind of an arrogant dope, like just a guy who made a lot of money, and, for no fault, no reason of his own. He's just stupid, and he thinks of himself highly. And he was making these horrible videos, and he made this video on suicide, and it was so disrespectful to people who survive, suicide. I mean, who are survivors of people who have suicide. My daughter had just committed suicide, and some of the people who were doing the meditation had heard about heartfulness through me, watched it, and it was like horrifically bad, right? Just clueless, and Dodgy said stupid ass shit in the whole video. And so I was like, this is just not right. Like, this is everything Sajmarg isn't supposed to be. And Dodgy just, like, he's out of the flow of things, and he makes bad decisions. And when COVID hit, like right before that, Dodgy did everything wrong. I mean, he said shit like it came from pangolin. He was talking about coming from chickens. Like, he just, everything he said was wrong. He's a pharmacist on top of it, right? And he made it mandatory for people to get the vax. And my brother is really anti-vax. From being his Vietnam days, he got a bunch of shit that, you know, everyone got sick and, you know, they were all bummed. They tested shit on soldiers and stuff, right? Of course, the Agent Orange and all that. And my brother is really an anti-vax person. But he was pro-mask. Like, he was wearing 2 masks. And he got some special masks. Like, he loved the masks. And he's really, you know, he doesn't like to get sick. So he was a whole thing there. Even though he was, like, isolated. And he's the kind of person that wears a mask in the car, right? Like, he's totally into it. And when I told him that Dodgy was pushing the vax, and I sent him video clips because he didn't believe me. He doesn't listen to me, like, you know, all this stuff. He resisted it. And it was like the last time we talked, because I was just like, you know, I needed to be able to be free to, you know, I didn't need people around me who were drinking the Kool-Aid, right? And all these people that were just lying about, in denial about Dodgy. Same thing that I deal with Trump here, right? If I was going to be honest, and I started posting stuff about Dodgy, and when I did, all these people came forward, and they told me about the Brighter Mind scam and all these other things, you know, where he was claiming it was a scam that already existed called midbrain activation scam in India, where he's, you know, they do these stupid exercises and claim that kids can, you know, with blindfolds can solve Rubik's Cubes by smelling colors and feeling colors. It's just stupid shit, like just really stupid. And, you know, all this stuff came out, and then even more stuff. I went back and reviewed the videos of some of the things Dodgy said about Chargy, and it's just the best. Like, Dodgy sucks. He's failed. He's a failed master. And there's nothing in the Sajmark system to talk about how to deal with a person who becomes the master of the system, becomes a scumbag, and their ego takes over, and they fail. They fall spiritually. Because he had he had all the spiritual work done to him to be a master, and he didn't. He failed, right? And I knew my brother, you know, wouldn't be able to hear this. And I started to post this stuff, like I said. I posted some stuff on Facebook, and a bunch of people watched. And, you know, I was basically doing a memoir in my journey series, talking about my spiritual journey. And if I was going to do that honestly, I was going to say shit. You know, when you do a memoir, you're going to say shit that you think, you know, about other people that they don't think about themselves. And I had to do that with my brother, and I wasn't psyched about it, but it just had to be done because it was part of the problem, right? And so, you know, he would accuse me of having dodgy derangement syndrome, DDS. DDS is also what a dentist is, like what they call doctors. You know, if they behind their name, it's, you know, DDS, whatever that stands for, the acronym. It means you're a dentist, right? So they're all, this thing kind of is tied in. And so, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago, called me out of the blue, and the phone rang. I didn't answer, and I just, you know, I wasn't going to deal with him. And I just talked about him recently, about him and my ex. Like, some thoughts came up, and I posted maybe some of it in my normal videos here, and then most of it on my journey series, and some on my other channels. And I thought maybe you heard it and you want to talk about it, you know, which would have been a better situation than him, like, just, you know, not listen. I'm glad he doesn't listen, because he wouldn't listen to me anyway, right? He, you know, he doesn't listen to me. Like, when we talk, I talk about 20% of the time, and when I'm talking, he's just waiting for me to get done to say what he's going to say. And he repeats the same stories over and over again, sometimes in the conversation. He's getting older, and it's just, you know, it's unpleasant. So he called me, and, you know, he somehow left a voicemail, and my thing isn't even set up for voicemail. I don't even know how it happened, but the voicemail is, he said to me that master, he means Dodgy, had given him, he's saying master like we both agree that Dodgy's master, like it's what we both call him, right? You know, and I don't call him that because he's a piece of shit, right? He's like destroyed something that, you know, I mean, it's the thing that's like most valuable to me, and he's fucking wrecked it, right? And, like, you know, like, he's the devil to me, like, he's just the worst person. I mean, that, you know, and it's, to me, what the future of humanity, the solution for humanity, is Sajmark, and he's destroyed it with his Heartfulness cult. And, you know, he said, my brother said he's, you know, in Belize from that he's been given an assignment, and, you know, he can't receive telephone calls, and he kept on calling me and just wanted me to pick up, and, you know, I didn't want to talk to him for all the above reasons, right? When you go to a foreign country, your phone plan, you know, your Verizon plan doesn't have coverage there, so you can get international calling, and it's fucking expensive. And, you know, so my brother, I mean, he's on a fixed income, and he just couldn't afford that. And he doesn't read text either, and I don't even know if he can receive text. Like, you can get different plans, like ones where you receive text. But so, you know, like, it's a situation where I can't call him back and I don't want to. And so I sent him an email, and I, you know, in the email I said, you know, and, you know, I read this stuff before on my last Journey series, but greetings, Peter. Glad to hear you're doing well in Belize. I'm not sure how much you know about this, but I no longer do in Heartfulness, and I believe that Dodgy's a fallen master. I've included a long voiceover describing the research and discoveries that led me to this conclusion. I don't know if you will listen to it. I know he wouldn't. Or not, but either way, I believe that Heartfulness is a cult, and I don't have any contact with any of the people and still practice and follow Dodgy. I explain this in more detail in the attachment audio file. I find that any contact with Heartfulness Dodgy people just wreck my condition, you know, my spiritual condition, and bring me down. The whole thing has been stressful for me, and I'm in a good place with it. So I just want to let you know that I love you and wish you well. You know, because I don't want to talk to him. And you know, I love him, and you know, I'm grateful for the positive things from my brother, which I've, you know, talked about in various videos, his truther stuff, and you know, some of the ways he influenced me. But you know, he had a very negative influence as well, and this was a bad thing because, you know, I mean, it's my brother's attitude towards the masters of the system was fanatical, and because, you know, there wasn't the flow, that he didn't feel the transmission, and he comes from a military, you know, a lot of stuff comes from his military time in the Vietnam War, you know, where he learned to be disciplined and, you know, this kind of thing, and following orders and whatever it is. And so, you know, there's a couple of stories I guess would indicate this, that there was these preceptor training books. Chargy gave a preceptor training in Europe somewhere, and there was audio tapes and also books that came out. And I read the book maybe 6 or 7 times. I don't even know how many times I read the book. There's 2 different trainings. And there was also audio, you know, audios, these tapes. You know, and when I first moved to New Mexico, when I became a preceptor, I worked 2 hours away. I lived in Albuquerque, and I commuted to Los Alamos. So it was a 4-hour drive each day to work. And then I moved to Santa Fe, which is an hour away. And so I would listen to these tapes. I had, you know, a few other tapes, but these preceptor tapes I listened to more than anything else. I must have listened to them 20 times. You know, there was like 7 hours of tape, and I just listened to it over and over again. And so there's a part in this, where Chargy says, you know, this is something you have to remember. Put it up somewhere, write it in gold lettering, and post it in your house somewhere, right? And, like, I went to my brother's, he was in the caretaker's cottage at the ashram, and he had this stuff up in gold letters, and it was his saying. And I think he's the only person that did that, right? He bought these cheap, you know, stencil letters at, like, Office Supply or some craft store, you know, like, just, and it wasn't, you know. And he made this thing. It was not like, it looked like a little kid had done it. And, you know, he put this saying up, and, you know, he took things literally because he didn't have any sort of abstract connection. And, like, there's just a lot of other stories I could tell, just a few of them. So he was talking to a senior preceptor, and these Indian guys were, you know, very intelligent, you know, very, you know, good at school. You know, they were top of the class, and they were, you know, very, reserved and subtle. You know, my brother and people in the mission are very, you know, my brother was one of the more aggressive people, you know, with a lot of testosterone. You know, there weren't so many people like my brother, right? And, you know, I used to find it funny and interesting. And my brother was talking to him, and in the Sajmarg system, you're supposed to have non-detachment detachment, that you were detached from your, you know, material life. Like, you do your duty, and, you know, you love your family and all these things, but you're also detached. Like, you don't run away from life. Like, you don't go into the woods and be a monk or be a, you know, a recluse, a sannyasi, as it's called in India. And you find detachment in yourself. You don't get attached to things, you know, even though you still have a human life. You have a normal human life with a family and a job and these things. And my brother was doing a good job as the caretaker. He put a lot of work into it. And, my brother kind of likes to, go over the top and be bold and, say things that are, like Trump does, right? He's got some Trump in him. And the guy said, well, you really must love this place, the ashram. And my brother said, yeah, it's just because the master gave me this position, but if he told me to burn it down, it would be, it would be a weenie roast. I mean, like, you burn it down, all the people were in it, right? Like, stupid shit. And the guy, is very, kind of conservative and, subtle. He goes, well, before you do that, you'd make sure that it was actually master giving you the orders, right? My brother tells me the story. And I'm like, because you're going over the top and you're saying shit. Like, he always, had to do things that were, he'd make these extraordinary kind of proclamations or, performative, I don't know what to call it, right? But, he has this attitude. And for him, it has to be the master is God and, you're just something small. But in the Sajmark system, the master is helping you to reach the level that he's at. It's unique in this way, that you're not there worshiping the master. Jesus is the only Son of God, and you could just, you can just accept him as Lord and Master, right? Lord and Savior. In Sajmark, you're trying to be, you're working towards being the master that's, everyone has a master within them. Everyone has the, their perfect version of themselves, its full expression of their soul. And the master of the system who's accomplished that goal is helping you become that, and also acts as an example. But he's not different from you. He's just someone who's further ahead than you, and you're eventually going to reach this goal. It might take you several more lives. It may take you 100 more lives, but he's your goal, and you're working towards that goal. And my brother has, sort of a soldier mentality where the master is somehow above you. A couple more stories. I was telling my wife this stuff last night. So my brother ended up dating this woman. She was in a bad marriage. He had been recently divorced, and they both worked as counselors, clinicians. My brother didn't have a master's degree, but he was a Vietnam vet, and they counseled Vietnam vets at the VA. And she ended up doing Sajmark, and they ended up going out together. But my brother really didn't like her. I could tell, like, he wasn't, like she was more into him than he was into her, and he was, whatever, kind of stringing her along. He was kind of a womanizer. And in the Sajmark system, when you're at the gatherings, there's, supposed to be celibacy, and certainly, sex out of marriage wasn't considered necessarily a good thing. And my brother was caretaker of the ashram, and this woman was coming to his, was visiting him, spending time with him in the caretaker's cottage in the ashram, and they were living like man and woman. And there was a woman who was an ex-Mormon who rebelled against her Mormon faith and became a real whore. Like back in the 60s, she was really promiscuous. And then she became one of those, there's nothing worse than a redeemed whore. like it's just, like she's just, someone becomes like just a fanatical about promiscuity for other people, right? Someone who's, themselves feels guilt and shame, and they put it on other people, some sort of saved, woman or whatever who used to be a whore, now it's like, whatever. So she, elder woman, like, she's probably a little bit older than my brother was. My brother's probably in his 60s then, 50s, 60s. She was probably 60s, late, older. And she goes to Chargy and says that my brother's, basically having sex with this woman in the cottage, and it isn't cool. And so Chargy calls my brother in to talk to him. And I get this story from his girlfriend. Like, I don't know any of this stuff, right? Because my brother comes up to me and says, I got good news, and it's not what you think. And I'm like, well, I don't think anything, because I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about, right? But he's unsettled. Like, he's not feeling good about, what's just happened, whatever it is. And his girlfriend's looking shocked. And, like, this is the interaction we have. And he says, that he is going back to his ex-wife, and she's going back to her ex-husband. And I'm like, what are you talking about? His ex-wife hates my brother. was agoraphobic, right? Which was, he didn't, he couldn't leave his house, and he could only go within like a couple of miles of his house, and he would have these panic attacks, which none of us knew, but he'd wear these sunglasses and hat, and he was such a like a tough guy, but I had no idea he was having these panic attacks. And he somehow blamed his wife for being enabling him. And he meets this blonde girl that's probably 10 or 15 years younger than his wife, younger than him, and he goes off with her. And he leaves on my middle nephew's birthday, and the guy still, I'm sure, holds some kind of, he was just pissed at him, right? And nobody from my family called my brother's ex, but I had lived with them, and I didn't really have a good relationship. We hadn't really talked. But I called her because I was kind of freaked out about what's happening. And I was the only one who reached out, and I was sympathetic to, he was fucked up what he did, right? And this blonde woman was a fucking nightmare. She was crazy. She did this kind of bizarre art, and she had a painting that was supposed to be about her love, the love between her and my brother, and they had an argument, and she slit it with a knife. It was like, she was like crazy. And my brother's telling stories, and she was a really messed up woman. And but that's going to come back into play. And so my brother's ex would never take him back. Like, she was bitter and angry, and he had done things throughout the divorce. Like, he bought a ring for this. My nephew was dating some girl, and he'd got a basketball scholarship, and he was dating this girl, and the girl was, I guess, ended up cheating on him, and was kind of a nightmare. But he bought her an engagement ring because she was kind of hinting at it. But they were in college, and they were no way ready to get engaged. And my brother, he was just left his wife, and he used their joint credit card to buy my nephew a ring. And his girlfriend was like, well, I should get a ring too, right? So he bought her a ring, and my brother's ex saw the credit card statement and found that out. Like, just, it was bad. Like, bad shit like that was happening, right? And there was no way. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And my brother's girlfriend's ex-husband was an alcoholic and kind of abusive. And he had been really kind of a dick since their divorce. So it was really bad, right? Like, it just wouldn't happen. And so his girlfriend pulls me aside later and goes, I saw the reaction. She says, I saw the reaction on your face. And, Peter's not being honest with what happened. So Chargy called him in and said, this person said that this is going on, and what are we going to do about it? He was waiting for my brother to say, well, we'll get married, right? Like, he clearly was doing that. And the woman was waiting for my brother to say, we'll get married, because she thought he was lying to her, and he was playing her along, like he was stringing her along. But he had no intention of marrying her. And so my brother eventually said, well, what should we do? Like, and Chargy, wanted him to come up with the answer, because he didn't want to tell him, get married. And so Chargy, out of the blue, just says, you should go back to your original husband and your original exes. And which was, my brother later said that some divine things came out of it. Like, he kind of ended up, it helped his relationship with his sons. It helped this woman's relationship with her kids. I think she had 2 or 3 boys herself, sons or whatever. But like, neither person took him back. Like, it was just, whatever happened there was because my brother didn't want to step up and marry this woman, right? And years later, he would break up with this woman, and she would accost me in the middle of the night when I was about to get a sitting from Dodgy. Dodgy was going to be Chargy's representative the next day. I was going to get an individual sitting. I got really sick. You get, what people call the shits, and some old-time person, like, the food there and things like this, it's just what happens when you go to India. But I got really sick, and I was up, throwing up and going to the bathroom. It was just a mess. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and she comes up to me, and she just starts blasting my brother and saying that, well, I guess this blonde woman, when my brother started the meditation, he brought this blonde girl that he left his wife for with him. And she couldn't do the meditation. She only went to, you're supposed to get 3 sittings. And she was opening her eyes, and she couldn't meditate. Like, she just was too fucked up inside. Like she couldn't sit still. She was just a wreck. She was kind of crazy. And my brother, with his new girlfriend, the one that he was with at the ashram, he took her car and he drove his ex-girlfriend down to the ashram where I assume that they were intimate. And after this whole thing happened, and he gave her her final sitting, even though it had been like years since she had her first two, which it doesn't work that way. Like she should have gotten 3 sittings. And she was really bitter about all these things. Like she had all this list of things that my brother had done and taken advantage of her and these things. But I'm saying this because there's his ability to figure out what the master wanted him to do and do it wasn't there. And he wouldn't do it. Like he wouldn't marry this girl, even though that's what Master Chargy wanted him to do. And Master Chargy wasn't going to tell him to get married. Like he couldn't. Like that's not going to fucking work. I mean, that's not even just like an arranged marriage. It's like, people who are dating, and Chargy says, well, you guys can't be guys can't be, having sex in the caretaker cottage if you're not married and things like this. And, I mean, again, you can't even, Chargy couldn't even impose those rules. It was just suggestions, right? There's no sins inside Shmarg. It's just like, just there has to be some level of, ethics and morality and, some, like that's, Chargy said promiscuity is where immorality sets in, right? And so, like, but there's no rules about it. There's no hard and fast rules. It's just like, this is what it's supposed to be, and, you're supposed to aspire to be something better, right? And so he couldn't tell my brother what to do, and my brother couldn't figure out for himself. So Chargy came up with some crazy thing, like, go back to your exes, and my brother's like, oh, yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. Chargy said it, let's do it. And the woman was not psyched. She was really bummed, right? What Chargy was actually doing was exposing my brother's lack of commitment to this woman, to her, because he was playing her along, right? And he did it without just, coming out and saying it. But my brother was just blindly following Chargy's orders because he couldn't step up and find the master within. And so the final story was this. There's a guy, they'll call him Mr. C. Mr. C, I think, has quit Shmarg, and we were friends on Facebook, and he just hates Trump. Like, he's just gone full liberal, and he posts, like, hatred towards Trump constantly. But back when he was a practitioner of the system, he was also an ex-Vietnam guy, and he had some, like, psychological issues, but he was entertaining and different than most people because he didn't have a filter, and he would say things other people wouldn't. And he was kind of funny, and he had written some books, and he had similar experiences to what I had in his initial sittings. And he went to India and spent all this time with Chargy and had all this audio and videotape of his conversations, and he wrote a book of his conversations with Chargy. Books available, and it's a pretty good book. It's, I mean, the Chargy part. And, he talked about the idea of everybody becoming a master, like that's something that he appealed to him, right? Like he gave a talk one time, and he asked Chargy, who is the master? And Chargy said, well, somebody very much like you. Chargy was trying to say that everybody has the master within them, right? And so that was Mr. C's big thing. And at these gatherings, I used to, everyone had to do a volunteer job, and I'd get up early and make the coffee. Like I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and make, there'd be these 3 big pots of coffee. And, I put extra coffee in it. People, praised my coffee making abilities. That's back when I used to drink coffee. And, I found out I had a sort of analogy to it. I started drinking chai instead. And now nothing. Right now I don't do anything. Because, like, I'm very sensitive to caffeine. Like, once in a while I eat a little piece of chocolate. But it's, my system is very sensitive to caffeine. And so, I would get up and make the coffee, then I'd go meditate. Like, you meditate before dawn is the best time, like to have the best meditations, and that's part of the practice. But, now I'm not so, I'm less strict about it because of just, life. But back when I was, I didn't have a family and I was, I was able to do that. I used to do that. And so I got up at 4 a.m. and I meditated. It was like 5 in the morning. And my brother came back and started sitting. I was sitting in the kitchen. Maybe I was eating something or something. There's a cafeteria. Or maybe I was just sitting there waiting for group meditation. And my brother comes and sits down. And Mr. C comes down with a bowl of cereal. And the master of the system is, there's just a sensitivity and openness, and they just absorb whatever's in the atmosphere. like when Chargy would go and stay at somebody's home and he'd sleep in, the people would give up their, their master bedroom or whatever to him. They would, the people that were with him would, or the people there would put brand new clean sheets on the bed. Like no energy, none of the energy that was there. Everything had to be like anything that would absorb any kind of energy and things like this, right? And he had these, a chair he used to give group meditation in, and it was kind of like a taboo to go sit in his chair, right? Because whatever your spiritual condition, whatever grossness you would have, whatever energy you might leave behind or whatever, he would have to clean it away, or whatever it was. Like the system, the first maxim of the system is that you're supposed to have a separate place to do your meditation. You're supposed to have a separate seat where you just sit when you meditate, and you're creating a condition and a field there, and it's just, and you're just exclusively to this meditation, right? So like it's part of that. And so my brother put a sign on the chair like, don't sit here, because kids would jump up on it and play on it, and there was a little meditation room, and there was a chair Chargy used to sit on, and then there was the big tent where he would give the group meditations. A small room sat about 200 people. The tent sat like 500. And so Mr. C goes to my brother, why are you, did you put the sign on the chair? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, well, why? He goes, because the master isn't like us, he's like better than us, like this thing. And Mr. C said, he sat in the chair, and Chargy asked him, how was it? He goes, oh, it was comfortable and great, like this thing. So they're having back and forth, and they both have a point. Like I can see both of their points, right? Because there's teachings about both ways of looking at it, right? And so they start getting pissed at each other, and they're both like fucking, guys who get into arguments and cause drama, and both like kind of, they're pretty like, aggressive. Like my brother's they're both kind of like tough guys, and they start arguing. And I just had this blissful meditation. I'm like, I was sitting here by myself, and you fucking guys, right? Like I'm just watching them, and I can feel their energy, so I'm kind of bummed by it. Like I just, I'm just in a peaceful mood. It's 5 o'clock in the fucking morning, and I just had a good meditation, and they're just, arguing over fucking nothing, right? Pointlessly. And so, so my brother, Mr. C's big thing is, you the master within, and the master's like you, and you're, he said a fellow very much like you. That's what Chargy's answer was, right? My brother says, that the master's different. And my brother starts telling the story of the Ramayana, which is, there's the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. And the incarnation of Vishnu was Krishna in the Mahabharata and Rama in the Ramayana. And there is a country called Sri Lanka. It's called Lanka in the Ramayana time. And it's basically Cuba, where Cuba is to America. It's 50 miles off the coast of India. And the squirrels all came together. All these animals, including squirrels, would take mouthfuls of dirt and drop it in the ocean. And like so many of them did this, and they built a bridge so Rama could walk across the bridge to go to Lanka, because his wife had been kidnapped by Ravana, who's the, I'm not pronouncing, Ravana maybe, who's the villain, right? And my brother compares himself to the squirrel, and then this guy, Mr. C, goes, so you don't think you're like the master? And he goes, no. And Mr. C goes, well, I feel sorry for you, and he just gets up and walks away. And my brother yells, you and him are twins, pal. But like it's this thing, like my brother's fanatical about the master, and this attitude. So I knew that, my seeing Dodgy being a piece of shit and failing, and me questioning this, like he just wasn't going to be able to go there. And so, when I told him about that Dodgy was making the vax mandatory, and he was pushing the vax, I sent him clips, and he denied, and he said, well, that's not what he was saying, and his interpretation was completely different. But eventually Dodgy came out and made it so that you couldn't go to the ashram unless you were vaxxed. And I wondered how my brother would handle that, right? But obviously he handled it the same way, he just deferred his own common sense and his own, sovereign consciousness. And even though he's got truther, he's like a kind of a truther in his own right. And he's refusing to see And he, you know, he'd experienced, he told me stories about some of the fucked up shit was going on, right? So I knew that if I was going to do this, and I was going to be public about it, and some of the stuff was, you know, talking about my brother, I had to just not talk to him, because he would just be lecturing me, or, you know, it would be arguments, and he, you know, I've seen him do it before. Like, there were just times just how he was, right? In my interactions with him. So there's no way that he was going to, you know, agree with me. And it would be really uncomfortable. Of course it is. Like when you're leaving a cult, and that's what it had become, a cult, right? It's funny, my brother came into the thing trying to, you know, rescue me from a cult when Saj Marg wasn't a cult. And now, like, I know what it is. I know what Dodgy is. He's a piece of shit who's wrecked something that's so fucking wonderful and, you know, so beneficial, and turned into some mundane fucking, you know, piece of shit cultish religion. And, you know, fuck him, right? Like, he sucks. You know, and so, I mean, you guys know how I feel about it. And, like, I just couldn't talk to my brother. So my brother calls me out of the blue, right? And, you know, all of our conversations, like, he'd be talking about Dodgy this and this, all this stuff, and he's surrounded by these guys. The other thing is that Chargy gave this talk about how all the people around him, you know, many of these were rich businessmen. They were Indians who came to America and made a lot of money, and they would donate and do work for the mission. But they were like horrible people. Like he said, they're the worst people, and people always complain about them. They were rude, and, you know, they were in charge. He talked about them being like the worst people, right? It's something that, you know, people have sent me. I've showed it in some of my Journey series videos. And one of the guys who was there was like kind of an inner circle guy. And Chargy was saying this, and he's really feeling bad about himself, right? This is one of the better guys. Like, he's just a good, you know, some Peter knows well. My brother knows well. And he, you know, he told me, I had a conversation with this guy, and he said, every one of those motherfuckers that was there, the next day, they were there and they heard Chargy say this, and the next day they came down to breakfast and they're laughing and patting each other on the back, and they're not thinking about this at all. He knows they were talking about them, and they don't feel bad about it, right? And my brother is in with all these guys, and my brother doesn't have really, he's got some money from retirement, and he's got some GI money from, you know, from being a veteran, but he doesn't have anything. He doesn't have a house. You know, he was living at the ashram, and he doesn't have any purpose. He's a restless person. Like, he needs to do something. And, you know, there's always being the caretaker of the ashram that they've now closed down, and maybe they're selling it. I don't know. Like, you know, they tried to throw him out of there. And so my brother doesn't have anything. His kind of retirement plan, and the people that he knows, his support system, are these horrible fucking people that are around Dodgy, right? And so all he has is Saj Marg, and he's dying. And, you know, and, like, I mean, it sucks that it's a cult, and, you know, and everybody should realize it. And I you know, all these people claim to love Chargy and have watched Dodgy throw him under the bus. You know, even this idea that if, you know, the master's infallible, and the reason why people are accepting Dodgy is because Chargy, you know, Chargy nominated him to be his representative, to be his successor, and that, you know, he is the legitimate successor. Dodgy has shit all over Chargy and his legacy. He's erased him from the mission. So him doing that means that, you know, all these people who love Chargy, and he won't let them talk about it, and he's getting rid of his books, and, you know, he's minimizing his accomplishments, all these things. So you got to choose one or the other, right? They both can't be right. You know, like he's saying Chargy wasn't even really a master, right? And so if he wasn't a master, then he couldn't make a disciple. You know, the whole reason people accept Dodgy is because Chargy said, this is my successor. And as soon as Chargy died, Dodgy started to talk shit about him. And so that's a whole thing. And, you know, they all have to, I mean, I dislike all these people. Like, they, you know, to me, they just failed in ways that I never would dream. I can't believe this has happened, right? You know, but my brother, like, he doesn't have anything else, right? So, you know, it's probably not in his best interest to listen to the audio I sent. I mean, he couldn't listen to it with an open mind. Plus, he doesn't fucking listen to me. Like, he would never, you know, there's things that I have, like, where I have surpassed him, certainly in this area. You know, I just know more, and I've, you know, as a truther and as a Abhyasi. But, like, he's just always going to talk to me like he's the guy who's teaching me, and, you know, he could never learn from me, you know, these things. And so I have, you know, I don't want to fucking talk to him for all those reasons, for obvious reasons. And, you know, there's just nothing for me to say. So anyways, he wrote back to me last night, you know, because I I'd already sent to put the video up. And it says, greetings. This is what I said to him. Greetings, Peter. Glad to hear you're doing well in Belize. And he wrote back, glad to hear you're doing well. If you do want to talk, the only way of getting hold of me right now is WhatsApp. Love, Peter. And so, that's probably our last exchange, which is good. I'm glad our last exchange is, cordial. And, there's no animosity, which there would be if we talked. I don't want to have a, like our last conversation was kind of just, we're kind of arguing and, whatever, him denying something that turned out to be, I was right. Like, and right in a way that, something had to be done, like an action had to be taken because the master of the system is not a master, he's a cult leader. And, that was a significant change, and there was a fall from what happened before, and, like we all have to deal with it. But anyways, just thought I would share all that stuff. And, this thing with the dentist and all this stuff, and, there's an owl. I've been talking about owls. Like the night my brother called me that day and left me the message, and I knew I had to respond. I was up all night thinking about Dodgy and all the shit he had done, and I was, formulating the voiceover that I would say to my brother. And I just, it was a bad night. The owl was hooting outside, and, owls have all this different kind of, they represent all these different things. And, I just, it's a whole thing. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful. Okay, I had a few more things to add here. I went for a walk with my dogs. I went to Costco. I ate lunch. I started to peter out. No pun intended. I don't do puns. But, I just, when I talk for about an hour, I just kind of, it's hard for me to focus, and, I just get kind of, I need a break. And I usually I took a number of breaks during the, even the hour-long talk. But I had a few more things to wrap this up. I want to tie this to the video that's going to be entitled Politics is for Dummies. And, I talk about that a lot in the beginning of the video and throughout. And this has to do with that. I want to tie that into that. But I'm also going to add this to the Journey series as well. I just made the 156 Journey series available to the members. But what I want to say here is, this shows you how polarized. We live in a time where everything is so polarized and so binary, right? Either Trump is going to save America or he's not. Either Kamala is going to save America or she's not, right? Like, that's what's at stake. That's how they're billing everything. And you're either with somebody or against them. And there's no, like, half measures. There's no middle ground. Before in politics, it used to be that you were really bummed when your side lost, but you would accept the president, and it wasn't like it was going to be the end of the world. And, it sucked to lose, and, depending how much you were invested in it. But the animosity and the division was nothing like it is today, where both sides are claiming that the other side wants to destroy America. And, there's people who say, well, Trump is not as bad as Kamala, or Kamala's not as bad, at least Kamala's not Trump. There are people who are sort of in the middle of the road, but those people have no group. They're just lost. They don't have anything really. Just, they don't really believe in anything, and they're not voting on what they're seeing in front of them, because what's being presented, they're denying what's being presented to them as all or nothing. And in terms of a spiritual master, either somebody is or they aren't. There's no, well, he's pretty good, or he's kind of saintly, or he's almost there, right? There's either he is or he isn't. He has mastered himself. It's predicated, the whole system's master-based system, where there has to be somebody who's an example of your goal that you're aspiring to be like, that you can look up to and aspire to be like that person. And to everybody who's not in the cult, no one would think that of Dodgy. Dodgy's a fool. He's stupid. He's comes across like he's, he makes bad decisions, but he comes across as like just kind of a mid-level executive, kind of, thinks is using his position to, like people who use their position to talk down other people, like Kamala Harris does, I guess Trump in his way too, where they talk down other people when they don't have anything to talk down. They're not better than other people, like they're not above them. He's just using his position to, to justify his you know, his position. Right? Like, he's not justifying his position based in merit. He's just saying, I'm great because of my position, right? And so it's my position that makes me great, not the fact that I'm great, you know, not that I've reached this. And there's no being great, there's no being narcissistic, right? You have to prove to people. In the Sajmark system, the master has to prove to each person. Each person is supposed to test the master and see if they're a master of quality, if they actually are a master. And it goes for each person that's nominated. Just because Chargy said, this is the guy, doesn't mean he's the guy, right? You have to believe he's the guy. And anybody who tests this guy would, you know, open-mindedly would say, this guy sucks, right? It's not only he's like a criminal, he's like, you know, he does criminal behaviors. He's a lowlife motherfucker, right? He's not a master. And so the way the system is, you know, everybody who still believes in it and you know, is indoctrinated in this cult of Dodgy and this whole artfulness debacle, like, I can't, you know, the division between us is so great. It's like, you know, the question, it's like a question of the fabric of reality, like what we see as reality, right? You know, and I experience this coming and going. Like, occasionally a liberal person shows up and, you know, just starts quoting from mainstream news and, you know, the bullshit that we all know is just bullshit, but they think it's like, it gives them authority, right? Occasionally I interact with somebody who's, you know, who's using the authority of the mainstream system and the mainstream narrative that we all know is bullshit against me in some way. And I'm like, you know, I'm so far beyond that. You can't even, like, we can't even have a conversation. And then, of course, the stupid Trumpers and the people who follow Trump blindly and ignore all of the evil that he is, like all this stuff that he does is selfish and narcissistic and all of it, right? And see him as a messiah. They see him as the incarnation of Jesus, some of them, right? All the cubies. And dealing with those people that, you know, say that you have Trump derangement syndrome if you, you know, just state things that are factual or things that you can perceive about Trump that are true. But anything that's negative against Trump is, you know, you're deranged. You have Trump derangement syndrome. It's like just a convenient way of, you know, these defense mechanisms that people put up. And it's hard to deal with people like that. I just don't do it. You know, why waste my time? I mean, you know, very few people here truly listen to me, right? But that's, you know, I mean, who cares? Like, it's not, you know, I mean, in terms of, like, that's on them. It's not has anything to do with me. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I can't, you know, get into how other people receive what I'm saying. Whatever they, you know, when they misquote me or misrepresent what I say or, you know, get offended or even, you know, on a positive level. There are people who want to call me master, and I'm saying I'm not a master. No, but you are, though. You know, like, and I'm not saying it in some humble way. I'm saying it because I know what a master is, and I know what it takes to be one, kind of. I mean, at least, you know, more than most people. And I know that I'm not willing to do any of that shit, right? It's just, like, I'm not, you know, and I've said it before, like, you might want to accept me as your master or call me master, but what makes you think I want to accept you as a disciple, right? Like, you know, it's like I'm not signing up for that shit, right? I'm not, you know, I wasn't asked to either by the divine master. I mean, I'm doing what I can. You know, I'm doing what I can do. And, you know, in the framework of, you know, there's a masterless system now that we call Gratefullness, which is the extension of the Sajmark system. But in terms of my brother having dodgy derangement syndrome or telling me I have dodgy derangement syndrome, and, you know, my conversations with him, you know, it's just, there's no, you can't, he's just an extreme person, intense person, and there's no middle ground. And, you know, my brother, for whatever, I mean, good, bad, and ugly, is somebody who has been a part of my life and, you know, influenced my life. It's kind of interesting that I'm the one who told him about Sajmark, and he thought it was a cult. And he was the first person to kind of introduce me to the truther narratives back when I was in college and maybe a little bit even in high school. Like, he told me about some of these things, like, you know, the Federal Reserve. So I already kind of knew a bunch of these things going into it. He was one of the first truthers that I, you know, he was one of the OG truthers. And, like, he's the one who's not being a truther in this situation. And I, who, you know, much more, I mean, Sajmark was much more my thing than it is his thing in terms of a spiritual connection. And I'm the one coming to him saying it's a cult, right? It's just, everything's kind of inverted and reversed. Invertendo is what they call it in Sajmark. You know, this is probably our last interaction. I mean, I don't know if he'll try to contact me again. I'm not going to try to contact him because, again, we don't share reality anymore. We don't share any common ground. You know, my brother was, you know, back when we came back from India in 2016, I went to a gathering in some sort of a temple they rented out in Los Angeles. I was living in Vegas, and I was completely ostracized in a way that I didn't think was possible. You know, people were, I mean, gossiping about me and just the looks I was getting, and Dodgy just walked by me like a punk, like he didn't know me, like just a little bitch. And I was like, you know, this is fucked up, right? This is just, you know, and not knowing the story, not anybody getting my side of the story, not anybody. You know, I had 4 kids. I had dealt with mental illness. I had a daughter who, in a couple of years, was going to commit suicide. And I was kind of, you know, limping back to America after just going through a tough situation after 18 years of marriage to somebody who was, you know, suicidal and self-abusive and abusive and, you know, had these mental breakdowns and all these things, right? You know, we'd have an argument. I'd have to hide the knives because she'd get the knives out and start cutting herself or threatening to kill herself, or, you know, like we'd start having a disagreement. I'd walk into the other room and take all the knives and hide them. And my daughter told me that she put all the knives in the freezer at one point. You know, I tried to protect my kids from this insanity. I mean, it just was draining and fucking nightmare. And they all turned on me, right? And so I remarried, and I wanted my wife to experience, you know, the ashram in Georgia. And me and my kids went down to Georgia. You know, my kids had now started. It was probably 2018. And, you know, right before COVID kicked in, maybe 2019, I don't know. And we went to the ashram in Molina. My brother was a caretaker. And, you know, I was given the cold shoulder by people. No one was really, you know, directly rude to me. But it was uncomfortable. But my brother was there, and he kind of had my back. My brother would say he has my back, but there are times my brother has rooted against me or been jealous or wanted me to fail or whatever. Like, you know, this, even in the context of the Sajmark system. But at least, you know, I had somebody there. And that wasn't, you know, I mean, unless Dodgy came out and told him to, because he would have totally thrown me under the bus if Dodgy, you know, and Dodgy could totally do that because he's a prick, right? But in terms of, and I didn't know that then, but in terms of like going to the gatherings, it's the only ashram I would feel comfortable going to. And, you know, it wasn't great. I mean, we had a good time. My wife and kids liked the condition. My wife liked the ashram, the energy there. You know, it was for Babaji's birthday, I think probably in 2019, but, you know, it could have been 2018. And, you know, then we went to India in 2020. But my brother was my last sort of contact to the mission. And, you know, just because of, you know, he's my biological brother, like everyone else is, you know, gone from my life, more or less. Few people. There's one guy who's struggling. He's kind of on the outs. He talks to me occasionally. But that part of my life is over, right? You know, I don't have much contact with everyone but my son and my you know, my family with my kids. You know, my other kids are estranged. My you know, I have 3 sisters and nieces and nephews. My brother's 3 boys called me. You know, I spent a lot of time with them. Like, they're like little brothers to me. When my daughter committed suicide, you know, I called my brother and he called them. And my sister, the second, the middle child, the 5th child out of 5. I mean, the 3rd child out of 5. I'm the 5th child. She's the 3rd child, and she's the middle child. And she called me, and she reminded me. One of my daughters reminded me of her, and we had, you know, good conversation. But her and her husband, who's an ex-priest who left the priesthood, both have cancer. They're battling cancer. She had some issues where she worked for a hospital, and they took her pension away from her, took her retirement. You know, just I mean, just the whole thing. But, you know, they don't share. They're not truthers or anything like this. It's like hard for me to have any kind of relationship with them. My family was just miserable to be around, right? We were much happier. I mean, all of us have experienced being happier with other people that are outside the family, right? And so our family gatherings were okay for about an hour or two, and then, like, it just, all this old shit would come up, and, you know, just, my parents being incompetent. Then my youngest, you know, the sister who's closest to me in age called me. I forget about what, like a little while ago. But you know, we don't talk. We're that part of my life's over. You know, I had my childhood, and I have, you know, nobody I have any contact with from my childhood, like other than my, you know, siblings, who, you know, all moved out. I mean, when I was, you know, 8 years old, like just my sister lived in the house. My brother was in Vietnam, and then he got married. My older sister, like when I was younger, she'd come back on weekends, the oldest sister, but she moved to, you know, we were in Connecticut, she moved to Massachusetts, and I mean, they were all kind of gone by the time I was like 10 years old. And the youngest sister stayed there when I was in high school, but we didn't have much of a relationship then, right? So, but going back to this, I have pretty much no connection to my childhood other than memories, right? There's just nothing there. And then I think about my childhood more than I think about high school. Like, you know, when I was smoking pot, and I mean, I don't even think that much of high school. I don't have any contact with any people from high school. And then my college years, where I was a sports person, I have one friend that calls me every year or every couple of years, and he tells me how everyone's doing. You know, we had like a intramural and a YMCA basketball team, and you know, we used to play sports and watch sports. You know, we were sports people. And, you know, I still watch sports now, or I've gone away from it at times and I come back to it. But it's really not that important to me. You know, it's a light thing. You know, it's something I do for when I'm just tired and I can't do work. And it's just something, you know, it's like a little bit of something that's familiar. And so then, you know, my marriage and my kids and my time as an Abhyasi doing Saj Marg, that was the next big phase. And that phase is pretty much over. I have almost no contact with anybody but my youngest son, who is less aware of that time than anybody, because he was always, you know, he was very young during that period of time. And, you know, we really don't talk about any of that stuff. It's kind of, we have a new relationship. He just got a job, which is good. He's kind of psyched about it. He's doing well now. And so there's that, you know, so our conversations are pretty much about none of those things, right? We don't talk about the family, or once in a while we talk about something like a memory comes up, or he gets in contact with my older son. But, you know, other than that, we don't, you know, there's nothing there. So my brother was kind of one of the last links to some of those, you know, my childhood. And, you know, he was a big part of my high school years, because I was trying to be a basketball player. I lived with him for a little bit of time when I was in college, and he got me a job, you know, different things. He helped out. Also helping with the basketball, my nephews, you know, my family. And then he was there. He became the only person in my family. I mean, my mom and my dad did the meditation for about a year. My mom did, at least. My dad did it like one time. And then he saw light and he quit, which was kind of hilarious. So my brother was kind of my last link to all that. And then, you know, when this thing happened with Dodgy, that relationship ended, because, you know, he's never going to confront the truth. He just can't. And probably shouldn't, because he's so old, and I mean, he doesn't have anything else. Like, what would he do? Like, his retirement plan is to work for the Heartfulness. And, you know, that's his whole self-esteem and all of it. And he has nowhere to go. And even if he could, he wouldn't confront it. He's not going to listen to me. And you know, and it's not my job to wake people up. I mean, I sent him a hour-long voiceover, and I said when I wrote the email, I don't know if you're going to listen to this or not, but I knew he wasn't going to listen to it, right? Because he doesn't listen to me when we have actual conversations. I mean, he's there. He gives me a chance to talk. Sometimes he'll interrupt me, but either way, he's not listening, right? Like, he's talking while I'm talking, you know, in his mind. And so, you know, there's just nothing there. In my family, like, I know why people don't like me from my experiences with my family, how we come across, you know, the types of personalities we have, all this stuff, right? And so, you know, my past is just slowly disappearing. And, you know, I'm not really bummed about it, because, I mean, some of it was good, some of it was bad, but, you know, what I'm doing now and where I'm headed and you know, where I am is better. And, you know, you just have to leave things behind you. I mean, this is kind of the real non-attachment attachment, right? You live your life and you're not attached to these things, and when it's time for them to go, they go. You know, it's a little bit sad, I guess, a little bit. I mean, you have these human reactions to it. But we're not in a time for reminiscing, right? I mean, people's lives will be flashing before their eyes, as things get really real. But, you know, the ship be sinking, you know, so we don't really have time for sentimentality. I mean, it's just, you know, that's where it is. I mean, we're all running out of time. I mean, we're aging. I'm getting old. You know, I'm just, you know, I've 20, 30 more years here on this planet. And these are like my last good, you know, I mean, I'm going to get my physical health will, you know, my body's going to be breaking down more and all these things, right? And then whatever's happening with the system and collapse of the system and all of it. Like, we don't have time for that shit. You know, we live in a time where you're either with me or you're against me. Like, each person's saying that, right? Either people are with you or they're not. Because, you know, this is where we are. There's, like, you know, multiple wars going on. There's culture wars. There's, you know, spiritual wars. There's belief wars. I mean, it's just, you know, political wars. I mean, all this stuff. You know, they're all kind of intertwined. And you find less and less people that you can really relate to. And at some point you realize you can't convince those people. You can't get those people to your side. They're not listening to you. People are just shut down and shut off, and everyone's, you know, wrapped up in their own version of reality, and they're not open to whatever you have to say or think about it. And so, you know, you guys just do your best to understand what your work is and just plug ahead and move forward in these things, right? And, you know, like I mean, I just I felt a sense of relief, you know, like I said in the other video in my journey series about it. Maybe it was the last video, I don't know, my journey series video. And I said, you know, my brother once said that there's two kinds of people, like people that walk towards you and you get excited and happy, or somebody walks towards you and you get completely bummed, right? You know, Bob Dylan had that line in a song where he said, I wish you could be me for a minute to see what it is a drag to watch you coming towards me, right? And so, you know, not an exact quote, but, you know, the same kind of sentiment. And, you know, that's kind of how it is right now, where there's people that you're happy to be with, and that's a small group of people, and, you know, who you resonate with, and you guys have shared beliefs and shared realities, and the rest of the world is not that. And, you know, occasionally there'll be somebody who wakes up a little bit, or somebody who, you know, I mean, they have a realization, and, you know, they have a come to Jesus moment, or whatever it is you want to call it. But the majority of people, they ain't changing. And it's just this way, right? So, like, it's just, you know, how you want to spend your time. Just to wrap this thing up, to go back to the original point of this video, everything caters to dummies. You know, to the weakest and the lowest, and the, you know, like there's, in the election, there's 10 states, right, that have a small portion of those people who can't pick between two fucking polarized candidates, and they're catering to those people. Like all the rest of the people who are on their side, you know, the people who support them, you know, fuck those guys. All the states that are in the bag, and the two political candidates are dumping $1 billion to win over, you know, a couple thousand people in each of these states, maybe 10,000 people, you know, or whatever it is, 20,000 people, whatever amount of people it is. They're still on the fucking fence after everything they've seen. You know, these people are the worst fucking people. Why do they get to decide who fucking gets to be, you know, a fake president, right? Like, you know, why cater to those people? That's how we live in a time like that. You know, let's not appeal to the people who, you know, get that there's no difference and see the left-right paradigm for what it is. Let's not support those people. You know, we're trashed regularly, and we're just so far beyond the, you know, the people who can't make a decision, and yet they cater to those people, and that's how fucked everything is. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting for the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.